Hey guys, this is Frank Shamrock, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 123. Dennis Gradov here with Kasper Ozlowski on Wednesday, the 3rd of May, with tonsils that perhaps aren't really working that well for me today, Kasper, but we'll see how we go on the episode.
Yeah, we'll see if they hold up. Who knows? Maybe your whole throat's going to explode and that's going to be the end of Submission Radio. Hopefully not.
Ratings.
Ratings, yeah. Hopefully not, though, because we've got a pretty sexy lineup this week. It's a pretty spicy show. We have Tony Ferguson returning to the program. I mean, we haven't spoken to him in a while since this whole UFC 209 debacle, and he's been sounding off, so we wanted to get a bit of an update with Tony, see what's going on, when's he fighting, who's he fighting, all that kind of stuff. Kevin Lee, a man that we've never had on the program, but is being pushed at the moment. He's fighting Michael Chiesa in the main event, UFC Fight Night 112, and there's a lot to talk to Kevin Lee about. I mean, apparently Floyd Mayweather wants him to help him prepare for Conor McGregor. Obviously, the whole division's in shambles. There's this whole beef between him and Iaquinta. There's a lot to talk to Kevin about, and then Frank Shamrock, the legend himself, a lot to chat to Frank about in terms of the UFC, its general direction. We want to get a bit of an MMA veterans and pioneers perspective. He's also a very smart businessman. Also a few things to do with marijuana that we want to speak to Frank about. And then we've got a lot of topics to discuss as well, don't we, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. We'll be talking about a whole bunch of topics in the crazy world of MMA. Iaquinta, what's going on with him and his social media tweets? We'll be breaking it down and thinking about what's going to be happening with him next. We'll be discussing International Fight Week. Will it be as big as last year? We can probably say right now in the intro, no, it won't be. But we'll be discussing the implications of that and what we're sort of expecting at the end of the show. Cyborg, Jermaine, Megan Anderson, what's happening with these guys? Who's going to fight who? Will Jermaine come back and defend a title? We'll be discussing that as well. And Anderson Silva, he's not too happy. He gave a pretty intense interview to Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour. We listened to it, and we're going to give our thoughts about it, what we think should happen, and just what's going to come out of that. But possibly one of the most important things of the whole episode, Kasper, our Guardians of the Galaxy review. Damon Martin, he's a smart man who knows his way around a good movie, especially when it comes to movies such as Guardians of the Galaxy. Timothy Johnson mustaches on the way at the end of the episode, so that's something that everybody can look forward to. And just speaking about the guest lineup, Kevin Lee, so excited to have him on the show. This is his first time on Submission Radio. The interview was organized thanks to James Lynch. For those that don't know, James has a podcast called Parting Shots. We're big on James. He does amazing work, works for MMA Oddsbreaker, also does stuff for Flow Combat. He's a great guy. Make sure to follow Parting Shots at Parting Shots on Twitter, and make sure to follow James Lynch on Sports on Twitter as well. He does a lot of great work. But without further ado, Cass, next week, just want to quickly remind everybody that we will be doing a UFC 211 preview show. That's right. We'll be getting everybody together, same time, same place, some of the best journalists in the world coming onto the show, talking about the big card that is UFC 211. A lot of stuff to discuss, a lot of big matchups to discuss. So be prepared for that. That's, of course, going to be coming out same time next week. But we have our first guest on the line. And Cass, I believe you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys, the next guest is making his first appearance on Submission Radio at 24 years old. He's currently riding a 4-fight win streak, winning in an impressive fashion over Francisco Trinaldo in his last outing. He's now set to fight Michael Chiesa in a headline of UFC Fight Night 112. Kevin Lee, welcome to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
What's going on, my man? It's good to be here.
Kevin, welcome to the program. I mean, it's a pleasure to having you on the show, but tell us, how's life been since your last big win and the announcement of your exciting new matchup with Chiesa in Oklahoma as the headliner?
It's been pretty smooth, but, it ain't time for me to sit back and celebrate just yet. I got big things and I got big plans left for this year. So as soon as I came back, I went out and, I went to Miami for like a week. And, I just kind of I chilled for maybe like 2 weeks, and then I was right back on the horse. Getting back in this one with Chiesa. After this one, I headlined the card in Detroit. And we really start making some money around here.
Very nice, very nice. And just on this headlining spot, I mean, there's some fun fights on the card. You got Johnny Hendricks. He was talking to us last week about his big fight with Tim Boesch. You got BJ Penn. He's taking on Dennis Silva. Little Nog's on the card. How does it feel headlining a card with so many veterans and stars, and you obviously, kind of trumping all of them?
It shows that the UFC knows what they're doing. I think they're taking me on the same path as like they took Cody last year. Where he went from an unranked contender all the way to the number one to the number one guy. So I'm looking to follow that blueprint. The UFC knows what they're doing. They're putting me ahead of these guys because, I think I'll be the future of that division, and they know it, and they're going to put forth the promotion into it instead of a guy like I remember when I first made my first UFC win, BJ Penn was headlining the card. So it's a big honor to be on the same card with him and a little bit above him.
Mm-mm. I mean, you've been in the UFC since 2014, and apart from losses to Iaquinta and Leonardo Santos, you've won all of your other fights, and this includes such names as our very own Jake Matthews, Efrain Escudero, John Tuck, amongst others. Are you happy sort of with the way the UFC have promoted you thus far in your run?
That has been a big. I have gotten a lot of people ask me about that, especially since Tyrone came out and was insinuating that the UFC is racist and all this. And bottom line is the UFC is not. The UFC is only about the money. You know what I mean? So I understand where they're coming from, where they've been. If you don't bring in that money, if you don't bring in that market that they're looking for, of course they're not going to push you. I think they just now starting to realize that I can bring in that secondary market and start to really push me on top of giving me, because I feel like I really had to go through, like you mentioned, I had the 2 losses. I really had to go through those in order to be to the level that I'm at and to the level that I'm going to get to be a championship fighter. And they kind of let me do that without too much of a, the UFC, every time I've asked for something personally, I've gotten it. So I can't really be too upset at it. Of course, I don't get as much of the push as the next guy, but I can kind of understand it just because of, what the market that I market to. They just didn't see the money in it as of right now.
Right, and I'm wondering, what do you think made them make that realization, maybe sort of turn the corner and realize that it is a good idea to sort of push you? Was it something that, did you have a conversation with them? We know that Tyron had that conversation with the UFC. Did you have to have the conversation, or did they sort of come to their own realization about it?
I think they more so came into their own realization. I mean, I've gotten in a lot of, I just don't really bite my tongue on a lot of stuff. So when they call me, I talk to them like I talk to anybody else, Me and Joe have gotten into some real kind of squabbles behind the scenes,
Please tell us about him now that he's left the company. Please tell us about him, Kevin.
I can't do that. I mean, I love Sean too much. Otherwise, he will be all over my ass next. Me and PR, are really close together. So, we've had like conversations here and there, but I think they more so have just realized, it's just coming around. I've had to take the long road, the hard road up, but, I don't expect it any different. I've had a lot of tougher fights beginning my UFC career than most of these guys have going throughout the UFC career. I've had a tough run, but it that's only going to make me better. And I'm, in retrospect, I'm better for it.
Speaking of those early tough fights, I mean, one of those was against Iaquinta, and he recently targeted you on Twitter saying Kevin Lee could never throw a right like me. Fucking dork, dropped him with a jab, ha, ha, ha. Were you surprised that he targeted you? And why do you think he did that?
No, me and Al been going together. I've been trying to get that one back since it happened. So me and Al have been going back and forth for years. I keep, we were supposed to fight when he was supposed to fight Melendez. Melendez pulled out. I was fighting James Montasmi on the same card. I offered to step up and fight him, and all of a sudden his knee was blown out, I called Joe right away. I'm like, Joe, listen, they can go and I'll have my knee surgically, my ACL surgically removed, and we can both hobble in there and we can get it down, Like I try my best to make the fight happen. For years, really, I've kept going back and forth, and now all of a sudden, I think he just starts to realize that he's dropped the ball on that, and he's going to try and make himself some money. So, more power to him. I mean, I think he's going about it the wrong way, but hopefully he make himself some money, and he make me some money in the process. He's only going to take half when it comes down to fight night, though.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what do you think about, obviously, him threatening to retire, voicing some of those complaints? And are you a little bit disappointed that if he leaves, you obviously won't get that, rematch that you've been wanting for a long time?
No, I think even he knows, everybody that's seen that fight, the first fight, and see me now, I mean, we pretty much all know I blow out the water. So I'm not even really too upset about it. Yeah, maybe if it was somebody now or something, but to be honest, like I've already gotten over it. As far as I'm concerned, he's the one that's chasing me now. So I mean, I might grant him a rematch. You know, I'm really not even that. You know, I won't be that. Like I told him, nobody really give a fuck if he retire. He can retire tomorrow, and you know, he'll go back to selling those houses, and I'll go back and I'll try and buy a house from him in New York. So you know, either way, I can do that. I'll bring him out. I'll let him be one of my sparring partners, and I'll get ready for a real fight, and you know, beat him up, and I'll pay him per round too.
Oh, very nice. So we putting this on paper. If you're looking for a house, you'll be using him for his services in the New York area.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a house, condo. You know, as long as he gives me a reasonable price, I'll give him a reasonable commission. So that's what I told him after this fight. Once I dust off his old boy Chiesa, you know, I'll go up to New York. I'll buy myself a condo or something.
I love it. I love it. Now, after you beat Trinaldo, Kevin, you said that you wanted Khabib next, but obviously would settle for Gilbert Melendez. I'm just curious, did your management try and have talks to get those fights locked in before you finally got with Chiesa?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were trying to make the Khabib fight happen. I think the only downplay in that one was Khabib didn't want to fight. That's really the only answer to it. I mean, we're still going to try to make that fight happen for December after this one, but the UFC wanted it. I wanted it. My manager wanted it. His manager wanted it. The only person who didn't want it was him. You know, I mean, and my second choice in that could have been Gil, but actually when they approached me with the Mike Chiesa fight, I thought it sounded better, smarter. Chiesa's ranked number 7 in the world for a reason. You know, so this will be the fight that really pushed me even more so than the Gil fight. So without Khabib, then, you know, this one came in as a close second.
Why do you think Khabib didn't want the fight?
You know, he claimed it was for Ramadan, but, you know I got a lot of Muslim friends. I don't know. Some of them fight during Ramadan. I mean, I guess the man only wants to sit there, and he only wants to fight once a year, and he wants to hold on to that oath for as long as he can. So, you know, more power to him. I hope he do it. Just get the hell out the way if he's gonna do that.
I mean, it's impressive, obviously, calling him out, because obviously he's seen as a nightmare matchup for a lot of guys. How do you rate his skills, and how do you feel that you match up against him? How do you think a fight between the two of you will play out?
Oh, it's still gonna happen. You know, I'm not. You know, that fight is 100% gonna happen in my mind. As whether it happens, you know, it could have happened in July. That would have been great. But, you know, if it happens in December, even next year, the fight's gonna happen. So I'm already gearing up and preparing myself for that fight. You know, I'm obviously the better wrestler. You know, people want to say that you know, I'm the better wrestler. I'm more athletic. I'm faster. He really don't stand a shot in the dark. So, you know, he'll try and take me down. He'll try and wrestle me, but that's hard to do for 5 rounds. And I got these thumpers once we get on the feet. I'm much faster, much quicker. I can kick more. We'll just see how the fight happens, but it's definitely gonna happen in my ass.
And I can hear the excitement in your voice when you think about that fight. And don't get us wrong, we will talk about Michael Chiesa in a moment. But with sort of getting excited for Khabib, is there a part of you that thinks about what happened at UFC 209 with obviously the last minute withdrawal and that whole unfortunate situation? I'm also wondering, what do you think that does in terms of his standings in the rankings?
You know, I thought that it should have dropped him in the rankings. I thought that you clearly have to put Tony Ferguson above him. Why they still? I mean, the reason why he's still considered the number one contender is all politics. You know, he brings in a huge market, a lot of money, much more than a guy like Tony. When Tony has fought and beat everybody that he's beat, and he's done it more recently and more frequently. So I didn't even think. I still don't consider Khabib to be the number one contender. You know, just people do. I mean, the man can't punch his way out of a paper bag. I mean, we see him on the feet. He's stiff. He's stiff as a board. You know, his shoulders are all locked up. And he's nervous out there. All he was trying to do is just grab a hold of you. I mean, you know, he don't have the level of experience in my eyes that people give him. You know, he might be 24-0 or whatever, but he's only got a couple fights in the UFC and not that many. You know, he's only had 1 or 2 these last couple years. So I've never gone a year without fighting. I've never gone a year without fighting more than once or more than twice, really. So I don't understand that, and it just don't get no respect from me. So that's why I want to make the fight happen.
Your division at the moment is going through an interesting situation, the lightweight division. What are your thoughts on the situation now with Conor McGregor being the champion, but not looking like he'll really kind of fight this year? Also, RDA is switching weight classes. Nate Diaz looks like he won't really be fighting anybody. You're in an interesting position right now. It kind of looks like the top of the division is it at a standstill or sort of leaving or not fighting in the next year or so. So how do you sort of survey that? What are your thoughts on it?
So that leaves a giant hole for me to jump right through. Like I said, I think when I look at this year, I'm looking at it. As far as like Cody is the perfect example for it because he just did it recently, and but you go back to guys like John Jones. He made his big breakthrough in 1 year. Where they go from unranked all the way to the number one contender or a champ spot. So it's gonna hold it up as far as McGregor is gonna pussyfoot around and he's trying to fight Mayweather, and I think that fight's gonna happen. So he's gonna be sitting out for a while, but I'm more on the Max Holloway kind of train with that. I ain't gonna chase the man if he don't want to fight. Like it's cool. Just leave it up to the big boys. We'll get the job done. He can go off and kiss his baby and kiss his wife at night and have a jolly good time and lead this sport for the real killers. So if he wants to go do something else, it's whatever. My goal right now, I got a short-term goal, and that's to be the number one contenders. So regardless of who the champ is, I'll be known as the number one contender.
For sure. And I think, like you mentioned, Kevin, a win over Michael Chiesa is a big hoop to jump through, but, in a wide-open division, it definitely catapults you up there. What do you think of his recent success? He's obviously beaten Jim Miller, and then his last victory came against, oh, God, it's a huge win. I'm having a mind blank at the worst possible moment. Help me out here, Kevin.
Well, he just beat Beneil Dariush.
There you go, yeah.
Which was a huge fight for him. He's really only lost to Jorge Masvidal, and you see, Masvidal's a fucking killer. The guy beats guys that he's not supposed to beat, and that ain't gonna happen on June 25th. He's not going. It ain't gonna happen again. So I think he's a very good fighter. Make no mistake. He shows up in shape. He's pushing the pace like a mother. He's very awkward. He's gonna beat a lot of guys. But my ducks are all in a row, and I'm gonna knock them down. So I think I'm doing the UFC a favor again by getting rid of this guy who they don't want to be in that top 5. You can't really market him against much of a. Even though people don't understand. Like he would give a lot of people a hell of a fight. He would give McGregor a hell of a fight, but it's just not a very marketable fight in terms of money.
Speaking of the matchup, both of you obviously really good wrestlers, top level, but. What do you see specifically as your strengths in this matchup when you kind of look at it on paper?
Even if you make, because he's great from the back. You give up your back to him, it's pretty much good night. He's great from your back. He's great from top position. He's great in the clinch. He does a lot of stuff great, but I do him just as good, if not better. On top of being a much better striker, much more polished. My kicks are way more devastating. I'm much faster. I'm much stronger. I'm much younger. I got more confidence than the man. I'll take his heart from him. So, we'll see how the fight goes. But as far as I'm concerned, it's all in a row for me. So I'm just knocking him down out the park now.
Obviously, you sound very confident. Talk to us about your preparation for this one. And obviously, you're training out at Extreme Couture, which is quite often overlooked these days with gyms like AKA, Jackson Winklejohn, ATT being the big focus in the media. What is it for you that makes Extreme Couture such a great place to train at?
It's the bond that guys have at Extreme Couture, but that's not the only place I train. I've set up, especially these past couple years, these past couple fights, I've really set up my training camps around myself. So, I use Robert Follis from Extreme Couture, and Robert Follis is one of the best coaches in the world. If you talk to him philosophy, he clearly, to me, he outranks Greg Jackson. He outranks Matt Hume. When you really sit down and actually talk to the man and get to understand that he knows the fight game, and he's been around it for a very long time. Just not a lot of guys have used him at that high level, if that makes sense, So, but and I've also got Dewey Cooper, who's my striking coach. A multiple-time kickboxing champion, multiple-time boxing champion. So and as far as translating those over to MMA, I think he's one of the best in the world. So I structure my entire camps around myself. I don't just stay at, it's not like a wrestling team, like I'm not at I don't just stay at one place. I structure every single camp. I bring out my own training partners. I pick specific guys to get me ready, and I take it from there. I'm pretty much the boss of it.
And speaking of preparations, I mean, we saw that you'll be helping Floyd Mayweather prepare for his potential boxing match against Conor McGregor. Mm-hmm. Just curious, how did this come about? Is this because of your training at his gym?
Yeah, I train at his gym a lot over with Dewey Cooper. But I'll go into his gym all the time. I know a lot of the guys on TNT. We just hang out with good friends or whatever. They approached me years ago about it. Actually, before my fight with Santos. Wow. They approached me and they asked me. They said if I ever would. So that was the first time it kind of got brought up. And then as these talks kind of got more heated, they started to give me timelines and stuff like that. And then we would start going over specifics. But, these past 2 months almost, it's been pretty dry. So I haven't heard anything back. I hear, just about as much rumors as the next person. So I'm not going to sit around and wait for him. The fight was supposed to happen in June, which I would have been available to help him. But, if they ain't going to fight until July, November, whenever they're going to fight, I don't know. But if it interfere with my schedule, I'm putting them on a back burner. I'm never going to, I'll let them make their own cheese. The only reason I was going to do it because the money was nice. So, the money, everything that comes with it and the notoriety and everything. But I'm going to create that for myself. So when they put the fight off, I was like, okay, I'm going to take this fight with Chiesa.
Yeah.
Because, I'm not going to sit around and wait. I'll beat McGregor my damn self. Yeah. I don't need to help somebody do it.
And let me ask you, what was sort of the dynamic? It's fascinating that they asked you so long ago. They obviously had you in their sights for a long time to obviously help prepare for Conor McGregor. But what's that dynamic like? This fight's obviously going to be a boxing match if and when it happens. So in terms of your help to Floyd Mayweather, why does he sort of want obviously you're a top lightweight, but why does he want an MMA guy to help him prepare?
Well, because he's fighting an MMA fighter this time, and Floyd's very smart. He understands the fight game. We just move different. We're very different from what you would see in a professional boxer. We do a lot of things, even some things that could be considered wrong in boxing when we're straight boxing, but they're right for MMA, and they're awkward. They're strange punches. The clinch work is obviously a dot different. Our tie-ups are different. We're just it's just different. You don't want to if you're getting ready to fight a wrestler, you don't bring out a great striker because he's a better fighter. You bring out another wrestler, even if he's not as good a fighter as a striker, if that makes sense. So they're bringing me out because I'm the closest to being able to emulate his style.
I'm curious, Kevin. I mean, we'll get back to Cass in just a second, but there's a lot of rumors about Floyd with his hands being broken numerous times, and there's even reports that he has trouble closing one of his fists because of all the damage he's had to his hands. And at 40 years old, some of that speculation sort of leads into the fact that maybe he won't be training as hard for Conor McGregor, or won't be taking him very seriously going into this fight, because obviously he is one of the greatest boxers of all time. From your perspective, where is Floyd physically, and how seriously would he take this fight if it did happen?
I'll say this. McGregor wouldn't stand a chance. There's no chance. He wouldn't stand a chance. It would be a once-in-a-lifetime punch. But even then, with the 8 counts and everything, it ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. Bigger gloves. He got an 8 count, smaller weight class. Yeah, it just ain't going to happen.
I'm just curious. What would your prediction be on the fight? I mean, we've spoken to a lot of different people from a lot of different camps. McGregor's camp, we've spoken to just people that are in the media. What would your prediction be if you had to sort of put down a prediction on how that one goes?
I think Mayweather would stop him in the later rounds. He would be exhausted. He would be exhausted after a few rounds. He just, it's just that pace. That pace is different. It's just a different sport, and people really don't understand that, because we also throw punches, but it's just different. The rule set is different. Literally everything is different. MMA would be different if you just said, you can't kick anymore, or, you can't throw knees. MMA in itself would be totally different. So it's just a different sport. It's just a different type of body type that goes into it. It's a different type of way of preparing the body. It's just different, So I can't even like really give a good prediction. I think that he's gonna knock him out in the later rounds, if I had to say, and I think that'll just come from pure exhaustion. You're taking a sprinter and you're putting them in there in a long distance race. Yeah, of course he's gonna lose. Conor's the much better fighter overall, and I think even Floyd would admit that. If we're talking about pure martial arts fighting skill, Conor's way. You can't even hold a candle to it. So, but as far as like an actual boxing match, you're playing in his sport. You ain't gonna, it's a good cash grab.
Of course.
That's what I'll say. It's a good cash grab.
Yeah, for sure. Let's finish on this note. The most important prediction. That's, of course, the man that you've got your sights set on, Michael Chiesa, on June 25th at UFC Fight Night 112. Do you?
Yes,
I don't know if you're a visualizing guy, but do you see a scenario that this one goes down? What's the official prediction for this fight?
I do. I'm gonna drown him. He's gonna drown. He's gonna get in there. He's gonna move around with me for a few minutes. He's gonna realize that everything that he does, I'm gonna shut down, and he's just gonna realize how much faster and stronger and more technical I am. So, he's gonna try that country boy will survive. Kind of push through. He's gonna try to his last legs, but I might just change his life because hard work and dedication will only take you so far. When the man that's better than you also puts in more hard work and more dedication to this. So, I think I'll change the man's life.
All right, guys. Well, exciting times are ahead. Make sure to follow Kevin on Twitter and Instagram at Motown Phenom. And let me ask you, my friend, is it for Facebook? Do you have a public account people can like, or is it just the personal one at the moment?
I do. It's Kevin Lee, the Motown Phenom is my pub, but I don't really run it, so that's the fan page. But Instagram is always the best place. I'm always active on Instagram. I'm pretty much on there every day.
There you go. There you
go. Instagram is definitely the best place at Motown Phenom.
And we know you're always sounding off, Kevin. We really appreciate your time. Been very gracious with it, and we look forward to seeing you in the fight. Good luck, and thanks for chatting with us.
My man, thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is an MMA legend and a pioneer in the sport, a former UFC light heavyweight champion, Strikeforce middleweight champion, WEC light heavyweight champion, and interim king of Pancrase. He now joins us on the program. Frank Shamrock, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Right on. Thanks for having me back, guys.
It's always a pleasure when you come on. Now, Frank, we know you were busy over in Japan recently commentating for Ryzen. Talk to us about it. How was the experience for you being back in Japan?
It was pretty cool, although it was very quick. It was a very fast trip. But yeah, it was pretty neat. We haven't been there for a few years, maybe about 5 years now.
I mean, we know you had some big fights in Japan, and you're a big star over there. What did you get up to in your short, limited time over there in Japan? Because, I mean, we imagine you've got a lot of friends, a lot of contacts, a lot of fun things to do, probably some fun parties to attend. So you've got sort of your pick of the litter of what to get up to. So what did you choose? What did you actually end up doing when you weren't commentating for Ryzen?
We worked nonstop, and then we had one day of leisure, and we went to Ome, which is northern Japan in the mountains, and we saw the cherry blossom festival, or what was left of it. So it was pretty nice. We got a little day off and did a little relaxation, and we rarely get relaxation, so it was nice.
Very nice, very nice. Whenever we think of Frank Shamrock in Japan, we always think of your classic fights against Bas Rutten. Gotta ask, do you and Bas ever catch up and talk about, these old days and the awesome rivalries that you guys had back in Japan?
Totally. Yeah, we do. I produce their podcast, Rutten and Ronaldo's podcast, so I get to see him about once a week, and it inevitably comes up, both the fights and the times and everything else we did, because it was just a crazy time to be a young fighter in an emerging sport, and then also to have no rules in Japan and kind of be able to do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. That's the news to us that you produced the podcast, and it's a great show. Just curious. I mean, you've had so many great fights in Japan. Is there a fight in particular that kind of stands out in your mind that you've had as an experience in Japan?
Gosh, I've had so many, but I would say my first one, fighting Kevin Jackson and winning the first UFC middleweight title, was pretty hardcore because I had all these crazy dreams and visions, and I told everybody I was going to teach the wrestlers a lesson in submission, and then I armbar Jackson in like 14 seconds, so it was all very prophetic, and I was a genius for a couple of years. But I think the biggest one was fighting Ensign Inoue in Valley Tudo, Japan, just because he was such a big guy, and it was my real first time stepping up into no rules with the tools to be competitive and stuff, and on top of that, the winner of that fight was the shoe-in for the UFC championship. So I wouldn't have beat Kevin Jackson or even had a chance to fight him had I not beat Ensign in that night. And then it just was also a knockdown, drag out. Someone's gonna get knocked out and die fight. So it was very entertaining, and it really endeared me to the fans because I think they saw what I was really about in that that Ensign fight.
Oh, of course, and Ensign obviously being a big part of Japanese MMA, so it makes a lot of sense. Now, last time you were on the show, Frankie, you spoke about some of your secret projects. One of those is the new talk show about marijuana. It's called Bake Out. Tell us a little bit about the show, Frank.
Oh, wow, it's fantastic. Yeah, the show has kind of morphed into a digital educational network. Because after we did the show, we took it out in the market. Everyone loved the show, but they're like, we need 1,000 shows. Like, we need so much of this information and so much of this content. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and are rolling out a whole digital network at bakeout.tv that is purely designed to be educational for cannabis. So medical, educational, everything surrounding it that you would need to participate or not in the cannabis industry.
I mean, cannabis is obviously something that has a big upside, but it's still not really legal in most parts of the world. I mean, from your perspective, why is it taking so long for a lot of the states in the US and other countries around the world to really kind of recognize the health benefits and the other benefits that cannabis and sort of marijuana can provide?
It's just been a lot of misinformation and political, positioning. And cannabis and marijuana and the whole, genre of personal medicine is an easy one to kind of attack and to, vilify and attach to certain things. But, the science doesn't lie. What we're figuring out now is, it's been 50 years of documented experimentation, and, we're just finding out it's a medicine. It's a plant like anything else. In the rest of the world, I think a lot of them have followed suit with, America and, followed our medical ideas. It goes back to natural medicine being the best thing for you. And, do we have access to it? Can we consume it? And, what are the ways to do it? And I think everyone has the right, no matter where you live in this world, to consume what the earth gives us as medicine. And there should be no barriers from that. And I think the world's catching up because they're figuring it out. I mean, it's always been with us. It's always been a medicine. And it's only been, a vilified medicine in the past, 100 years or so.
And I got to ask, Frank, because we've had a lot of legends on the show who speak about where their bodies are at these days, and, a lot of them are in a lot of pain. I'm just wondering, have you, even Bastarun, he's got his CBD that he's behind as well. Have you sort of used marijuana to deal with injuries? And I'm just wondering if you can give examples of how it sort of helped you in your career and sort of life after MMA.
Oh, for sure. Well, I used it my entire fighting career.
Oh.
Because when I was 16, I was diagnosed with scoliosis and a broken spine. I have a spondylolisthesis in my L3. So technically, I have a broken spine. And they told me when I was 16 I would never play contact sports and that I would need spinal surgery and I would need to be in a cage for a year. And then I would need to be on pain management for the rest of my life. And I told them I was going to be a world champion. And I had always had plans. But it led me down a path of natural medicines because I was, most people go home and they heal. I don't heal. My spine's jacked. Like, I'm jacked to this day. And, all the doctors said there's no way I could do this career. But I was able to do the career because I had a very consistent, very reliable medicine that healed inflammation, attacked pain, and also made me a lot happier about what I was doing. So I always laugh because to me that was a performance enhancer the entire time. Natural medicine that was enhancing my ability to perform. But I would have never been as successful as I was or am today without it. Because I would be on Vicodin and oxycodone and all the other highly addictive painkillers to manage my pain. I'm on nothing but cannabis, not aspirin, nothing.
Wow, that's crazy. I had no idea how much of an effect it had on your career and sort of how often you were doing it. I was wondering if you can share with us, Frank, what was your preferred consumption method when it came to marijuana? And also, how did you tackle, I guess, drug testing, especially towards the end of your career? And was there sort of a window where you would stop consuming marijuana? Or how often did you partake? Did you take it right up until your fights? Talk to us about that.
Sure. Well, the last question first. The golden timeline is 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I would stop 3 weeks out. I would just be in pain. I would, up my ice usage. And occasionally I would take painkillers during that time, leading up to championship fights or otherwise, just because of the testing. And there was no, ability to use back then. And I've always consumed, and I've always consumed in what I thought would be the healthiest and best way possible. When I was a kid, that was smoking, that was getting it, I didn't know how. Now I consume it in a vaporized organic format. So I use the cool volcano machine, the big bag, and I use it like a medical patient. I breathe in the vapors, but I don't combust anything. Like I don't believe in burning anything. I think all that is, not the best for you.
I'm just curious because, we've seen a lot of great athletes in the sport sort of struggle with testing, guys like Nick Diaz getting suspended and really sort of losing big portions of their career due to marijuana use. From your perspective, do you really believe it is sort of a performance enhancer that athletes need to stop doing going into fights? Or do you think because of everything that MMA fighters go through in terms of training, in terms of putting their body through all the stuff that they put their body through, it should almost be made legal so that they can have healthier, longer careers?
Well, it totally should, especially when you start reading the science and you realize that it also acts as a neuroprotectant, and it's got a lot of other cellular healing properties, which, many of these Western medicine drugs, especially the codeines and the morphines, that they just kill things and they just numb the pain. So when you talk about a contact sport like football, these people need it more than anything because they're taking repeated blows to their brain. In the United States, our government actually holds a patent on cannabis as a neuroprotectant, meaning that it'll heal the damage done to your brain. Everybody in a contact sport should be consuming this, and especially in sports where, like football, you're leading with your head.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating topic, and people have to tune into your show, Bakeout. It's a topic that we'd love to chat to you forever, but obviously we have to appease the MMA fans, Frank. So there's some other things we want to get your thoughts on. First of all, the UFC are really struggling to get big pay-per-views together now that McGregor and Ronda sort of out of the picture. Do you see the UFC rebounding from this and sort of building new stars, returning to where it was last year?
Yeah, they kind of have to. I think they've, kind of ignored the amateur star creating machine. And that's where these guys come from. I think they've been content to buy the star and, attract the star. But I think that attraction's gone. I think they need to get back to the basics of, how you create stars. And, you do that by letting athletes perform, giving them the stage and then giving them the freedom, like any artist. I think they got a little work to do on their culture. But I think if they do it, I think they will turn the corner because this is, every martial artist, every sports guy, everybody, gets it, loves it, wants to be a part of it. It's extremely compelling and addictive sport, deep to get into it.
I'm curious because obviously you're a great martial artist, a pioneer in the sport, but also a very great mind for business. And over the years, we've seen how the sport has really rapidly grown, bigger and bigger and bigger. And a lot of people would really argue sort of in a very sort of short period of time, it became a very mainstream sport. Do you think there's a chance it can sort of plateau and this could be kind of the beginning of a decreasing of popularity? We've seen it happen in Japan with pro wrestling and MMA as well. Is it possible that this is as high the sport gets and it starts to sort of decrease. And the story is, hey, 2016 was its peak, and then after that, it kind of lost its way.
Yeah, I mean, from a business perspective, if I were looking at the life cycle of a brand, we're winding this brand down unless drastic changes happen, and only because they had this very oppressive, very results-oriented culture that wasn't concerned about fighters and their rights and the chi and everything else, and now that community is pushed back. So they're not performing, they're not sacrificing, they want to be paid first. And, that's great, but you need a very, active and vibrant, and risk-taking culture to keep this type of growth going. And I think that part is stagnant. We need to find a way to reactivate, that martial spirit and that, that Rocky-esque dream. And it seems like it's, convoluted or, smoke and mirrors now. There's no real path, to go from my martial arts school to my UFC championship. And I think that's where they've lost the way.
What do you think about this massive pushback that we're seeing nowadays? I mean, between the Reebok deal and obviously Iaquinta sounding off, Anderson Silva just the other day. I mean, obviously, yourself and Tito Ortiz, this is something that's been going on for years, but like recently it's just sort of come to a head at the moment. What do you think about all these fighters now speaking out, and really how much do you think this affects the UFC's business? How much do you think this kind of impacts them maybe in the short term? Can it have a long-term effect on the UFC?
Well, it's going to have a long-term effect on the brand because these are the, forefathers of it. And if they're not, passionate and supporting it, then, it's just going to trickle down. But, it comes from the old ways, from the old practices, and those, they got to change. They got to change the way they treat these athletes. They got to change, the value that, is given, make it more fair. I think, the way the old regime was set up, most of that money flowed to the top, and, all the executives got paid big. But, these guys that really sacrificed, they didn't get much. And now they're starting to, speak about it. There's no pensions. There's no support. I know these guys. They're crippled. They got nothing. And nobody, there's no value or there's nothing for them to do. There's no help for them. There's no community. The UFC doesn't or hasn't made any, investments in that way. And, that's our culture. If there's no history, there's no future. That's what we're running into now. It's, the fans are like, well, where's the road? And there's no road anymore.
I'm curious because from everything that you mentioned, there's some work to do. But there was something else me and Casper were talking about just the other episode. I'm not sure if you saw this or not, but Cris Cyborg has been going back and forth with the UFC. And there was a particularly interesting tweet from one of the UFC Twitter accounts that sort of responded to Cris Cyborg, and it wasn't in the most positive way. And I think what me, Casper, and some of the other people that saw that tweet took away from it was that if you're a mainstream company, you're a mainstream sport, but sometimes the dealings with the fighters can seem a little bit petty and a little bit disrespectful from time to time when you look at it as a brand sort of talking to these fighters over social media like that. Do you think there's sort of a disconnect between where the brand is in terms of it being a mainstream sport, but then also how they sort of deal with fighters publicly in a public venue and sometimes have these public arguments that kind of don't really match where the sport is in the mainstream as to how they deal with their fighters in the public?
Yeah, well, I tell everybody that the girl's a lot prettier on camera than she really is. Because it's not a really developed sport. It doesn't have the amateur, it doesn't have all the stuff a regular sport has. And then when you look at the mechanics of it, why is Dana White the biggest star in the sport? The machine's built wrong. And that's why these people feel that. That's why I didn't do business with them. I'm like, wait a minute, this makes no sense. Dana's going to be the star. I'm risking my life in the cage. I risk everything to be here. It's like, Dana's not the star. It doesn't make any sense. So, they're just, the culture is Dana's the star. We're taking all the money. You guys suck. And they need to rebound from that. They need to come back from that. And I don't know the method. And it's a long way to go. But, that's the evolution of business. That's the evolution of sports.
When you look at the timeline where the Fertittas sold the UFC, I mean, they made over $4 billion for a company that seemed at the time like there was some big things coming. But behind the scenes, do you think this is possibly one of the smartest sales when it comes to, I suppose, of a business in a really long time? Do you think the Fertittas sort of foresaw this lull that was coming up, even though you had all these huge events like 205 coming up? At the same time, do you think they realized that, hey, this can't stick around forever and this is a perfect time to get out of this?
100%. The discord is coming, the regulation is coming, the government oversight is coming. So, yeah, I mean, that's the time to get out. The brand's had a great run, built up. The girl's beautiful, globally. No one knows what it's really like. Perfect time to get out. So, I mean, I applaud their business. They're great business. I knew they would be super successful with it, So, but at the same time, I want to be respected at work. I want to be cared for. I want my value to be, acknowledged.
Yeah, understandable, Frank. While we're talking about what's good for business, last time we had you on the program, we spoke a little bit about this Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor fight. It seemed like it was pretty unlikely. Now, it seems like it might actually materialize. I'm wondering, what you think it does sort of for the UFC, and obviously a lot of people believe it's going to make a lot of money, and it certainly will if it happens, but what do you think that does for the long-term effect? If Conor McGregor goes out and loses like a lot of people think he will, what do you think that does for the UFC? Could it be a detriment?
I don't think it's a detriment. I mean, they need all the big moments they can get, as well as the revenues from something like this. I think it could be a win-win for everybody. But, my only concern is, it goes back to the martial arts and mixed martial arts and, what are we really, truly doing? But, I think, sadly, everyone will pay and they'll probably be disappointed. And it probably won't be that big moment except for there'll be a bunch of money and awareness.
You sort of, it's interesting the way that you put it, because a lot of people really looking forward to this, think this will be sort of an exciting moment, even though it looks like Mayweather will probably go through McGregor quite quickly. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, what do you sort of see it as a bit of a, I suppose, disappointment when people tune in?
Well, I just think that it's just two opposing worlds. McGregor looks amazing in our world, because we're not polished strikers, and that persona is bigger than life. But I think Mayweather is always going to fight smart, and I don't think it's going to be exciting. I think it's going to be one-sided whopping, and then we're all going to be like, oh darn it, I thought there was much more. And I like Mayweather, but I quit going to his fights because they're not exciting. The moment's exciting. The fights are never exciting. They're just they're terrible. But it's boxing. It's brilliant, but it's not entertainment the way I see it. MMA style entertainment. That's a whole different vibe.
And what's interesting about, while we're talking about the UFC and sort of what direction they're heading in and how there's a bit of a lull, on the other side of the pond here in Bellator, they're sort of on the uprise. They've got fighters like Fedor Emelianenko. They're taking a lot of fighters from the UFC like Matt Mitrione, Lorenz Larkin, Rory McDonald, obviously Chael Sonnen. They got Vanderlei over there. Do you think they're in a position where they can really sort of capitalize? And I'm wondering if you consider them at any point to be a real competitor to the UFC maybe in the next few years.
I think in the next few years they can consume a strong market share, and I think they can definitely, they're already consuming some of the market and a lot of the stars. So I think they're going to end up being a player. I think the UFC is going to struggle, to find its footing and rebuild its culture, kind of get itself together and get some new stars, and that's Bellator's opportunity. The next year or so.
Yeah. And we really appreciate your time, Frank. We'll let you go in just a moment. But looking back now and seeing how this whole Reebok deal played out and athletes being unhappy and losing money on their sponsorships and sort of using that as one of the catalysts to going over to Bellator, do you think it was a big mistake by the UFC to implement this Reebok deal And do you think in a lot of ways it's kind of one of the last nails in the coffin for fighters considering jumping ship and going to Bellator?
No, it's not. It wasn't this deal. You know, it's the spirit of dealings that makes the culture not feel good and appreciated. It's the spirit of business. You know, when you're not appreciated, when you're not respected, then all of it matters. You know, when you are, then none of it matters. Then you love it and you're happy. And, you know, their practices and the way they, you know, directed this industry and then monetized it. No, it wasn't always the sweetest and nicest. And, you know, I'm in an industry where I risk my personal body for entertainment, and I demand that respect, or I'm not interested in a relationship. And, you know, they're meeting, you know, they're taking, you know, big white collar business and trying to mash it into this artistic culture. And they're finding, you know, you have to be nice to people and you have to be kind to them. You have to support them, you know, provide for them in the future. And I think it'll all right itself, but they're going to struggle while they figure it out.
The future is going to be very interesting. Frank, as we let you go, just wanted to ask you, is there anything else you can tell the fans about as far as what we can look out for from you next? Anything else big happening for Frank Shamrock in 2017? You obviously got your great show, potentially network and bake out. Anything else that we can look forward to?
I never say anything that's cool and going on. But let's just say I may be doing a lot of work in MMA very shortly.
Wow.
So something. This is compared to before. So you've got a big thing that you've got coming up. A lot more work than you have been previously. Is that what you're saying?
Well, technically, I'm actually doing work now. So yeah, but I've been thinking about getting back into MMA in some capacity, so I'm figuring that out. But I anticipate some more MMA in my life.
Wow, would it be in a public forum by any chance?
Perhaps.
Wow.
Perhaps. I can't talk much about it, but I see a lot of it coming in my future, and I'm deciding how to deal with all of that.
Wow, I mean, look, big things coming up, and I mean, obviously, fans would jump to the conclusion that Frank Shamrock's coming back for another fight. Can we rule that out at this point? It's not a fight, but it's some kind of big thing in the world of MMA.
Yeah. Can't be fighting nobody. I'm too old for that. But there's plenty of other stuff to do, and I'm going to do a bunch of that.
All right. Well, then we look forward to finding out what exactly that's going to be. And Frank, when you do have something finalized, you got to come back and hopefully do a big review. We'd love to tell everybody about it. In the meantime, you guys can follow Frank Shamrock on Twitter at Frank Shamrock. And Frank, we always appreciate you coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
All right on, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my two favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
All right, guys. Our next guest was last seen in the Octagon dismantling the former UFC lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos. Since then, he went through the unfortunate ordeal of having his interim title fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov fall through back in March. Nevertheless, he holds the UFC record for the most consecutive wins in lightweight history and is one of the most exciting fighters in the division. El Kukui, Tony Ferguson, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you today? You were feeling that intro, weren't you?
That fucking intro was great. Can you do that shit again? Because holy shit, that just fucking put goosebumps on my neck, my bro. That was great. Thank you so much. Beautiful introduction. Let's rock.
Casper's available to do voicemails as well, Tony, just in case you want him to do something after the interview.
That's cool. You know, we'll do a voiceover and everything else like that. We'll have him play Bruce Buffer. We'll post it on IG. We'll get fucking millions of fans and everything like that.
Love it.
Let's move on. Let's talk about whose ass I want to kick. How about that?
Ooh, I mean, we know you're just walking out of your management's office, and we want to talk about that. But before we do, Tony, we saw that you celebrated your son's first birthday a few days ago. Congratulations. We know how much he means to you. What did you guys do? What's a first birthday look like in the Ferguson household?
Well, one thing that was pretty exciting, man, I have to say, was he's almost walking, man. The dude's almost walking. I love it. He chooses crawling over walking because he can get to these spots actually pretty quick. But he prefers. We went to Chuck E. Cheese, and he's taken quite a liking to actually throwing baseball, which is kind of crazy.
Doing what? Sorry, I think he cut out there for a second, Tony. He's taken a liking to what?
Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. That's awesome.
No, good. No, he's taking a liking to baseball. He's got quite the arm. and he's just very bright, and he's honestly he's taken a liking to fighting. I try not to, but he sees me hitting the bag and sees me hitting mitts, and the dude gets excited. My little man gets excited, and he wants to go up to the bag. He wants to start hitting it, and he moves. He starts clapping his hands, and it's kind of crazy. I want him to go a different direction, but whatever he chooses to do, I'm gonna love it.
Wow. Just before we get off that, I'm just curious, why do you want him to go a different direction? Why not become a fighter like his old man?
Well, I grew up playing 3 different sports, man. I grew up playing 3 different sports like for a long time, like almost like 15 years, 18 years. Football, baseball, and wrestling. I'm tough as shit because I was a right side corner, man, and we won state in football, and I was always the dude dealing the damage. You know, I was even one of the guys that would kick off the ball and go down there and be the first person to tackle the motherfucker. So I was just the gamer since I was younger. If he wants to pursue fighting, I'm like, you know what? There is a way to get a scholarship out of it. How about we go to wrestling? You know, I want him to get an education and to do the education route and just whatever, man. Nobody ever wants to do what their old man does unless they really like it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's
he's a little badass though. He's a little badass though. I'll tell you straight up. He's a little badass. He's cool. And Spanish and English is going to be his language, and I think he's very bright, man. He's got a very bright future ahead of him, and I'm just going to keep providing like I do and whipping these asses like I do.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe 15, 16, 17, 18 years from now, we'll be talking to him and talking about the influence that he had on his athletic career. But let's talk about the recent champ. Yeah, let's talk about the recent events, of the unfortunate events of UFC 209. I mean, it's been some time now, Tony. Looking back on the whole situation, how are you feeling about it now? And do you feel like you've been able to sort of move on from that whole ill-fated situation and leave it kind of in the past?
Absolutely not. I have not been able to move on from that shit. Khabib sucks. He can't make weight. He's fat, and he needs to fire his fucking whole gym. Honestly, they all can't make weight. Literally, you probably should have took notes from Cormier. I mean, Towel 7 was in the air. He was almost levitating. But it was bullshit, man. These last couple of weeks have been absolutely bullshit from AKA. And DC's still a douche nozzle. I can't stand that fucker. But you know what? Whatever. AKA, same thing with Khabib. I don't really feel like preparing for this guy again. I mean, literally, this guy was such a pain in the ass in the beginning. It's just, it's an eyesore, man. I don't even like looking at this dude. He looks like a wet slushie when he wears that stupid hat. I can't say much about it just because it put such a bad taste in my mouth when I saw these videos of him eating shit food. I mean, fuck, Brock Lesnar was like, Tony, you want some shit food before your fight? And I was like, no, dude, I don't want no shit food. He's like, I got to perform good.
What did he offer you? Did Brock Lesnar really offer you some shit food? What did he offer you in the house?
Yeah, I think it was before my first fight on my birthday. It was fucking like February 12th. And it was, who was it? It was Justin Edwards. And I knocked that dude out with an up kick. And great fight, by the way. But it was the day before, and I had to make weight. And Chuck O'Neal had to do the same. And he was like, hey, y'all want some shit food? Hey, Tony, what do you want some shit food? And I was like, no, dude. It's like, no, man. He's like, but what do the guys want? I said, fucking In-N-Out. That's like good shit. So he ordered In-N-Out, and they all got that shit food, and I got to eat like fucking rabbit food, which sucked.
Oh man, I mean,
Brock
look,
was a trip, man.
It's all happening right now. So I know you mentioned on the MMA Hour after UFC 209 that you enjoyed life a bit and gained about 24 pounds. Have you shed the weight and have you returned to hard training, or are you still enjoying life? Because I mean, it doesn't look like at the moment there's really any kind of fight lined up.
Absolutely not. Right now, I have my options open, and what I'm doing is, there's sometimes you get the dad bod. Well, I shedded the dad bod, man. I'll be honest with you. I said, fuck that 205 pounds. I'm going to go down back to 175, 180. And what I'm doing is I'm getting my summer body, man. I started my little boot camps. I started doing my thing, and I'm getting shredded. I'm throwing weight around like it's nothing. And my plan is to be a bodybuilder someday after all this stuff. Maybe in the WWE. The Mexican Mango, sexy Latino heat flying off the top of the ropes.
Oh, wow.
Bam! Flying elbow smashing these motherfuckers. But no, besides that point, I'm just maintaining being a fucking a ninja, a shinobi ninja warrior, fucking just keeping my elbows sharp. The one thing I've been working on is my kicks and knees. My elbows are sharp, but I'm trying to establish some more deadly 8 limbs in my stuff with some wrestling, man. Snap Jitsu is where it's at. That's just basically what I'm coming up with. I'm spending a lot of time in the facilities in my academy, writing down my notes, coming up with new, interesting ninja ways to take out my opponent in less than 10 seconds.
Wow.
Literally.
I love it. And I love the Mexican Mangler nickname. I think it definitely sticks. You mentioned though that you were just walking outside of your management's office. Got to ask, what is going on there? Are deals being drawn up? And I'm wondering, has the UFC approached you yet with any fights or offers or suggestions? Are they trying to get you back in the octagon to test out these ninja moves yet?
Well, I would think that they're protecting their number one prospect that makes them the most money, because obviously that's going to make them the most lettuce and bread. But, I'm down to deliver ass whoopings any day. And I've been calling out the top guys and even calling out the lesser guys. And there's no bites, man. So what I'm trying to do is I'm maintaining and putting my business ventures in other ways and making my money work for me, because these motherfuckers are soft. The only people that I see that are willing to fight for the interim title are probably like the guys that are in like the top 30. Because honestly, I think that these dudes number 1, 2, literally they fucking disappeared. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, if you have the division at a halt, I put this division at a halt. Put it that way. I worked my ass up so far up into this division that I became a glitch. You can guys call me glitch from now on, because they don't know what to do. They don't want me to have the title. They don't want me to have the title. Management or my fucking UFC don't want me to have the title. And I worked my way up from the mail room ballroom to the CEO position where I'm trying to go, my friend. And I ain't stopping, because these dudes are soft. And the money made them soft, and these guys are at weed conventions or they're going doing these other things, but they forgot about the game. They forgot about the hunger that it possesses. When you see Conor step inside that ring again, it's going to be all about show. Watch his ass get knocked out. He's going to retire. He will never come back to the lightweight division. That dude will never show his face again. It will never happen. He'll go and retire and avoid me like the Irish plague. He doesn't want to face the Kukui. I'm the worst nightmare. You got Khabib Nurmagomedov using Tiramisu Tuesday as an excuse to avoid Tony Ferguson. I can't explain it, dude. You got Wing Wednesday. Who's next? I mean, literally the only fucking game dude that's really down to throw down and make that money fight, which I know absolutely fucking everybody's going to want to fucking see this fight, is Edson Barboza T-Ferg too. Now, we're going to go toe-to-toe. Now I would say exclude all these other dudes. We got some real dudes that are looking to fight for the interim title. Now, I'm down to get bloody again, but, hey, I'm a lot better a fighter than I was the last time. Now, if we want to even dig deeper, there's other options. I can go up to 170, beat T. Woodley's ass. That dude talks a lot of shit and is too bougie for me. Straight up, that dude needs an ass whooping to set himself straight and fucking, you know what? I tell you what, bring it back a different level. Because I sized him up, and 170 is just a hop, skip, and a scotch away from me, and I like making weight at 170. I enjoy a lot more fast food, and I'm a little bit happier. My wife likes me a little bit jolly. So I'm fat at any division, even 45. I said that I wouldn't go any divisions because this and that, but I'm realizing that this division is full of bitches, and I can't help that. So I'm going to find work wherever I got to go, and don't matter what. I got a contract, so technically they got to fight my ass.
Wow. There is a lot to unpack with what you just said. You just said so many things, Tony, but I want to ask, you mentioned that the
Read
UFC...
it and wait. Let's go. All fucking in. Give me that title. Give me that title. Where's that belt? That's mine. Fuck you, Conor. Fuck you, Conor. Fuck you, Nate. You bunch of bitches. You guys are holding hands in the fucking locker room. Fucking scandalous.
Wow, even more things to talk about. But you mentioned that the UFC nor your management don't want you to win the title. Do you really feel that way? And do you sort of, because obviously you and Conor share the same management, do you feel that your back's a little bit against the wall in that sense? Because obviously Conor is the big name at the moment and you're trying to take away that title from him.
Well, I'm not going to talk shit, but what I'll call and what I'll say is call it something like I call a presto changeo. When you walk into a place and you look and you're in an aura, you like to be around good things. When I walk into this office at one time in my management's office, it was beautiful. Yeah, it was cool. You have my picture. I mean, my picture is small. I mean, like literally, I got a fucking small picture. It looks like a fucking tile, like one of those tiles that you would put on like on the floor and kind of shit. And it's ridiculous. It's me choking out Abel Trujillo. How old is that shit? Yeah, exactly. And I've got many bloodier battles. There's some cool pictures with me with my hand up and doing this. By the way, it's on a shirt. Just keep lookout on my website, TonyFerguson.mma.com. But what I'm trying to say is I walk into this place and I see pictures up, but whatever they have somebody else in the room, there's a presto changeo and there's a certain different picture that gets posted on the wall. Now, I happen to live close enough to my management where I just show up. So if they don't answer my phone call, I'm going to be like, hey, I hope these dudes are working because I'm spending my hard-ass money on these guys. And I don't know if there's a conflict of interest or not. Maybe you can ask my management, Adi Attar and Sayamaka Fukuwaki, if there is, because I was there first. I have yet to receive a title, and the monetary gains from point A and point B are absolutely completely different. The leverage is way off. I've been putting in my time, 9 consecutive victories, performance bonuses up to yin-yang, and I can go on and on. So I just said my piece, in my opinion. Do I think my worth is a little bit more than what I'm valued? Yes. Do I think that my energy should be more dispersed my way on my management side? Yes, of course. I've been there for a while. I've showed some promise, and I've been trying to help the company a lot. This is not a discussion between the company and myself because we don't have a problem. But what I want to see is how many other fighters that are out there have this problem where it might be a conflict of interest. Are you making your same money? Are you doing what you have to do to get your name out there? I mean, literally, these are questions that are kind of in my head, but they're just opinions because obviously I make my money by winning and beating ass. But yet, when nobody wants to sign on the paper, who's to blame? And nobody's speaking my name, who's to blame? That's my concern. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that for a second. You mentioned Nate Diaz briefly just before, and you spoke about the fact that, you know, that's a fight that you're interested in. I'm just wondering what happened. Did your management try to approach the UFC about making that fight? And what was the response from Nate Diaz? Did you guys get a response? Is this still a possibility?
Well, I figured, I was like, well, shit, man. I was like, the next person that beat the dude that's next in line would be Nate. So I had nothing to do with management. It had absolutely nothing to do with management. I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, well, shit. And it had nothing to do with the fucking money either, man. I get paid either way, and I get paid good. These dudes want to fucking make it soft, and they want to be like, no, money fight, this and that, money fight. Yeah, that's cool. The money will come to you. You just got to keep winning. You got to keep putting your time. You got to obviously do it. But these bitches want to fucking fight like one time and go and retire. I understand it. You're a pussy. Don't worry about it. It's cool. You don't like to fight. All right. You're in the wrong sport. Go try tennis. This is a man's sport. I fight. I like to have job security. Give me somebody in front of me that wants to have their ass beat. Give me somebody that wants to fucking go in there and test their wit against me. I thought this was the UFC and we're supposed to be the best and the toughest fighters in the world. Point and proven, Khabib, McGregor, and Nate Diaz are a bunch of bitches. Well, let me say it this way. They're a bunch of non-winners. Didn't mean to say it that way. Let me try to clean it up. These guys are not in it to win it. Their Bushido way is not in the Shinobi way. They're not in it for a ninja. You say ninja skills, you want to say don't be scared, homie. It's all fake for them. And I understand it. You want to build your following, is cool. I say you ain't shit without your homeboys. Because on one-on-one become me and Nate or me and Khabib or myself and McGregor, you know how the outcome's going to go. It's going to go bloody. And I don't know if Conor deserves a red penny night at the side of my hands, like the butcher. Because that dude is an easy plate to pick. And 3-hit wonder, literally talk your way to a title. I have to give it to him. You know, not everybody can do it the way he did it. But as far as technical goes, I'm way, way better of a fighter than him. I hit way harder than him, and I'm very hard to hit. And I roll with the punches more than anybody. One of my leg kicks will chop his leg off, and that dude will go limping home to Ireland. So you say that with any other person that wants to go toe-to-toe with me, I don't have to throw kicks. You want to go toe-to-toe? My boxing's a lot better than yours. I'm a lot harder to hit when I'm moving. My footwork's great. I'm going to start posting more videos out there so all you fans can start following me on my way to victory, which is Tony Ferguson XT on that Twitter thingy and on that IG. I'm tired of this leprechaun, man. I'm seriously tired of the leprechaun. I'm tired of these fake-ass dudes. Let some real fighters up in the division. I say, fuck these rankings. They don't know shit. I mean, the only people that I really pay attention to are the G's that I have on my phone, the ones that call me and know exactly. But we know already that I'm rough around the edges. But I'm a fucking tough as nails fighter, and I don't give a shit about the other shit. I don't. I'm in it to win it, and that belt will look a lot better on my shelf than his.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Edson Barboza before, Tony. I'm just wondering where, with that fight, at least I guess Nate Diaz, that's a sort of big money fight. Khabib, he was obviously, at the top, and that was the fight that a lot of people wanted, and obviously Conor's got the belt. With Edson Barboza, what do you think that fight does for you in the division? Because it almost seems like you're really having to sort of filter through, the rankings and move down, because it sounds like you just want to fight. Are you just sort of aching and itching for a fight at the moment? What does Edson sort of do for you?
Absolutely not.
No?
No. Fuck no. I ain't gonna fucking try to go and do it like a Venata. I saved that fight in Sioux Falls by taking a chance against a no-namer and actually allowing myself to get hit and make a fight incredible. I looked at Big John's face in between before the round, and like it was like, man, I can't believe you're gonna fight this kid, Tony. It was almost like that, and I felt kind of bad. So y'all crowd got a badass fight, man. Like I was in there fucking duck. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give these guys a motherfucking fight because I knew this jiu-jitsu dude wasn't for shit, and the guy wanted to have his confidence up. I mean, cool. You got to give it to the rookie. But like this is a different story, man. These guys, I want to fight. I want to work for something and earn it. How about that? When's the last time somebody actually like worked for something and earned it instead of talk their way to fucking do it? The last time I could remember that was an Edson Barbosa fight. Because these other dudes don't matter, man. Like we left, we could sell that motherfucker. I don't have to talk shit. You want to see skill? You want to see people want to go? You match somebody else's up and then sell. I don't have to talk 1 ounce of shit, and at least the kids will have somebody else to follow. Because literally, I don't have to talk shit about beheading people or doing this other stuff. I really don't. I let my actions do the talking, and what I'll do is I won't be stingy with my presentation of my art. I will show you my punching and my kicks and my movement. I will show you all this stuff, which so many years, because that's how I am. I'm an artist, man. I only want to show you guys a finished project. I don't want to show you a piece of shit. That's what I want. Give me an opponent that deserves a finished project. Give me an opponent. It's not. I'm not in a hurry. I want somebody that's quality caliber, that earns it and deserves it. Because this division is fucking bullshit, and it needs to be reinforced again. This is a new age Johnny Cage talking. This is a new world.
Let me put it like this, Tony. If you were to fight again in the lightweight division, would you only be fighting if the interim title was on the line? Are you open to fighting even if that stipulation wasn't there? And also, what kind of time frame are you looking at to possibly get back in there if the right opponent comes along and the right sort of stipulation is there?
Well, I'm going to tell you straight up, the UFC can only hide me for so long because I'm going to have that bitch in one way or another. That belt's going to be mine. You want to give me another fight, I'm ready for it. You want to give me the interim title fight, that's fine. I max out as much money as I can do no matter what, and I'm never bitching about getting performance bonuses after the fight. I say very little, and I fucking just move on, man. I want to give you guys something and leave the stage left. Exit stage left. That's it. I paint my blood on that canvas for everybody to see. And I want you guys to look like an ink blot one of those times. I want everybody like the UFC to take a picture shot after I fight one of these times and see where the blood plays. And maybe you guys can make a picture out of it. Because that's what the fans want. That's what the fans agree on. And every fucking carnal fan that's out there in the world, I don't know about these casual fans, because the casual fans don't listen to this show. The hardcore fans listen to this show. But we want those casual fans. I love you casual fans. I love every fan. I love every fan that hates me, and I love every fan that loves me, because I'm going to turn all you fucking haters into lovers, and I'm a lover, not a fighter, and they need some asses to be whooped, and UFC needs to give me a fucking fight. I don't care when. Don't fucking bullshit. Let's go.
I love it, Tony. Tony, we appreciate the time you're giving us. We're going to let you go in just a moment, even though we could talk to you all day. I just want to get people excited because you did mention 170. You mentioned Tyron Woodley. Are there any? And obviously, your quest has always been not so much money or belts. You sort of want the glory of being, the best pound for pound fighter and getting that respect. Are there any dream opponents that you see at 170? Obviously, there's Maia, there's Masvidal. Nick Diaz might be returning. GSP. Who stands out to you?
You know what? I'm looking at 170 like it's a whole new city full of different food that I never ate. And I'm the master with the Yelp machine that's going to go in that bitch and check all these motherfuckers out. I did it at 155. I have no problem dropping to 145 or 170 and taking all these dudes out one by one. And that's job security. I don't give two shits, man. These guys want to see me fight, that's cool as fuck, because I enjoy doing this. I love what I'm doing. You want me to have that belt? Maybe I'll be sad when I have that belt because I'll be so busy and I won't do anything. I told people, enjoy me now before I have that belt, because I might be an asshole when I have it. I don't know, because everybody always fucking changes. But I keep still being the same person because I have it in my head to be the best and the greatest. So regardless of the weight, regardless of the time, and regardless of where, the same max amount of effort, but more videos and everything else will be put into this camp. And it's going to be fucking amazing. And you fans are in for a fucking treat. So the next time you guys see me on the media, whether it's Fox or on pay-per-view, make sure y'all fuckers tune in, because I'm going to say something interesting, and you guys never know what I'm going to say. So just tune in. I love y'all. And make sure you follow me on my way to victory at Tony Ferguson XT.
That's right. Well, Tony, we really appreciate the time. We want to remind all the fans as well, you've got the new apparel available, the El Kakuli line. You've got that slogan, says Go and Diamond, and some great T-shirts up there. Everybody can check that out at TonyFergusonMMA.com. Make sure to jump on there, grab some T-shirts, and follow Tony. I mean, things are heating up right now, Tony. We can't wait to see what happens next. As always, we really appreciate your time and coming on to Submission Radio. It's always an honor.
You guys are fucking badass. My favorite in the world. Love you guys. Hey, have a badass day.
Hey guys, this is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Joining us here on the program is a friend of the show. You know him from his amazing work on Fox Sports and, of course, Nerdcore Movement. There's a lot of stuff we want to talk to this man about, and you would know him as Damon Martin, the Submission Radio Buffet Team of 2016. We're hoping to extend that to 2017. Damon, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. We better be extending that championship team into 2017.
What did you think? What did you think of the skills from our team? Because Casper, his play was pretty impressive. But for me, do you remember what my big thing was? Getting the extra skin from the turkey.
Yeah, I think it was the turkey skin that put us over the top for the championship. I think that was really what put us over the top.
I hear people freaked out when you did that, Dennis.
Yeah, I know. And then I looked at Mike Dice in the eyes, and I think a part of him lost respect for me that day that I was never able to recover. But anyway, let's bounce back to the chat. Speaking of outrageous things, Damon and Casper, I mean, Iaquinta, he's been on social media, and he's got some Trump-like looking tweets happening right now on social media. Some interesting things put out by him. Damon, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on this sort of persona that we're seeing Al morph into as we go along this kind of journey that he's on?
You know, I wish I could tell you that I totally understood it, but I'm not really sure that I do. I'm not certain if he's trying to piss off people to the point where maybe he's trying to earn his release from the UFC, or if he's just going off and just because he can go off right now doesn't care what people think of him. You know, I'm a big believer in asking for what you want. If you're not happy with something, then go out and make yourself happy, or go out and get what you want out of your contract, out of your, you know, your situation with the UFC, whatever the case may be. I've just thought since day one that, you know, there are ways to handle it and ways to talk about it. And, you know, I did an interview with Al last year where we talked, you know, extensively about, you know, his injuries and coming back from surgeries and, you know, his grievances with the UFC. And he came out very intelligent and very well spoken. And, you know, I thought it, you know, raised some very, very valid points. But I think when you go on Twitter and you start F-bombing people, and then those weird kind of like, I'm now the president of the UFC, and just kind of like, it was just a bizarre rant. Maybe it's just for fun. I don't know. But I'm not really sure that he's getting the point across. I think that, you know, saying what you say after the fight about, you know, maybe I won't fight again. Is it really worth it? All those kind of things, that resonates. But when you start going on these kind of weird Twitter rants and these weird kind of, I don't even know what you'd call them really. I think people just kind of tune out a little bit because it's just like anything else. You know, there's such a thing as too much of a good thing. I think if you're going to make these points and raise these concerns, which I think he has every right to do, you have to pick your battles. And I'm just not sure what battle he's picking by what he's doing on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm with you, Damon. I don't really understand the end game, and you know, obviously you would think he's pissing off a lot of people, such as Dana White and certain people in the UFC, and we've seen that the UFC is still happy to do business with people, even if there have been bridges burned in the past. We saw that with Tito Ortiz. We saw that with plenty of other people. I'm with you. I don't really know what he's going for. I do find it extremely entertaining though, and I will say that sometimes with Al, and we mentioned this last week on the show, sometimes when he gets kind of emotional and he speaks off the cuff, like we've seen this in multiple post-fight interviews, his words are a little bit all over the place, and I think they're not very centered. I think that's why some people have this sentiment of him that, you know, Al's not really well-spoken, maybe he's not an intelligent guy, and I think it's completely the opposite. But on Twitter, where he sort of has time to vet what he says and what he thinks, and he has time to make these calculated tweets, even if they're not necessarily finding the right home, I do think they're incredibly entertaining. He's got that one about Dana White, Warrior King that never was one. He's saying things like, we will be reaching out to Burt Watson. He had the fighter's best interests at heart. Incredible energy. You're seeing the likes and the retweets that he's getting, and it is drastically more than what he did in the past. And I think he's sort of if not pandering to the UFC, he's pandering to the fans, and I think a lot of fans are sort of getting behind him. So I don't know. It's almost Chael Sonnen-like. I think it's different because with Chael Sonnen, he was obviously promoting fights and he wasn't biting the UFC. Iaquinta's kind of, he's very real, and I think, you know, a lot of people, the people that are getting up in the fans' minds these days are the people that are being very real and being very unfiltered. I don't know that it's necessarily going to translate to the UFC saying, well, you know what, you're real and you've got fans, you've got draws, so we're going to bring you back. At the end of the day, it is Twitter, and as of currently, Al's only on about 37,500 followers, but at the very least, he'll be considered a people's champion.
And I think it also goes back to the fact that, you know, Al loves the Iron Sheik, loves that whole kind of pro wrestling approach to it. And, you know, he's in the spotlight. You get your kind of 15 minutes of spotlight after a card's finished. He made that impact. And, you know, he wants to keep that attention on himself. But there's a great saying out there that goes, if you listen to your fans, you may end up sitting next to them. And that's the situation that may be happening here with Al. I mean, he's got the attention, but what do you do with it? And sometimes you have these, I mean, everybody gets this. You get this sort of feeling like, all right, I'm going to go along with this. I'm going to keep the attention on me. I'm going to keep the controversy coming. I'm going to keep the funny kind of tweets going out. But at the end of the day, you kind of water yourself down a little bit, and you don't have what just like what Damon Martin says, you don't really have, I suppose, a message behind it. And I guess if I was in Al's shoes, I would say, you know, it's great what you're doing. I like how you're standing up to the UFC. But at the end of the day, and have fun on social media, but at the end of the day, sometimes less is more. And if you have more of a message behind your tweets, then you're actually going for something. And eventually fans kind of, I don't think they disrespect you, but you kind of start being a bit of a caricature of yourself. And people don't sort of see you as an athlete and more like a bit of a troll, I suppose. Not a troll, but someone that's on social media and putting out sort of stuff that from time to time doesn't really have much value or purpose. And I think you want to stay away from that. And I'm not saying Al's there yet, but I think it's important to reinforce the point, hey, or coming back to the point or explaining the point of what he's doing. At the moment, it's a little bit confusing. But yeah, I mean, it is crazy in the world of MMA. And Casper, one of the other things, I mean, a lot of people unhappy when it comes to the UFC. Another person that's unhappy is, of course, the legend Anderson Silva. He was on the MMA Hour this week. I don't think I've heard him be this frustrated in quite some time. He basically said that he wants to fight Yoel Romero for the interim middleweight title at UFC 212 in Rio, or he'll retire. He basically said something along the lines of, the guys no give this fight for me for the interim belt. I'm done. I'll be with my family. I'm done. It seems like there were a lot of promises that didn't really come to fruition when his new contract was signed. One of them was him fighting GSP. He feels like he's been wronged. What was your reaction to this?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the promises. I think this whole story is more Anderson being upset and feeling like he was disrespected more than the interim title itself. I think that one of the big ones was obviously this Reebok deal. He had to give up his Nike sponsorship, and according to him, Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta flew out and spoke to him about it, so he did it. There was, of course, the DC situation at UFC 200 where he stepped up on very, very short notice, and I wouldn't say saved the car, but obviously made a good attempt at it. And then you mentioned the GSP thing. He was promised that super fight. Now GSP's fighting Bisping, and then, of course, there's obviously his legendary career that he had in the UFC, and is still having. So he feels like he's owed something, and I think really what it comes down to is he wants to respect. He wants to sort of put these guys on notice and make it public that, look, I was promised things and this is what happens in the UFC, and I don't get my promises. So there's that. On the other hand, you think, well, here's a guy who has had a really rough last few years. His record hasn't been great at all, to say the least, and that's being polite. There was the Weidman losses. There was the Nick Diaz return fight. That wasn't the greatest fight, understandably, but then there was the followed drug test failure, the followed ridiculous defense of the drug test. There was the Michael Bisping fight, which people sort of started looking at Anderson and saying, look, he's not the same guy that he used to be. More importantly, he lost that fight. Then there was the DC fight. Then there was the Brunson fight, in which he won, but a lot of people consider that he lost. And so he's not really in a position to demand an interim title shot. And he spoke about how my fans want to see me at fight in Brazil. What about my fans? What about the people that bought tickets? Why am I not fighting on this card? At the same time, he was offered a fight. He was offered Luke Rockhold, and he didn't want to take that fight. His explanation was that beating Luke Rockhold doesn't really do much for him. Personally, I would disagree. Luke Rockhold is one fight away from being a champion. Or sorry, his last fight was, a loss, but it was for the title, and he's still very well respected in the division by fans and his peers. Everybody sees him as a tough guy, and I think a lot of people still expect that he might be potentially a champion in the future. So if Anderson took that fight and beat Luke Rockhold, that says a lot, regardless of Rockhold coming off a loss. So now he wants Yoel Romero, and he wants this interim title. I think it's a bit of a ridiculous thought, but the problem with this is that when you look at his opponent, Yoel Romero, it's not ridiculous for Yoel. Yoel is a guy that most people think was screwed over in not getting the title shot in the first place. So while it doesn't work for Anderson, it certainly does for Yoel. And the other part is, obviously the UFC have kind of put themselves in a corner where they've been giving out interim titles left, right, and center. There was Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis. That was just to beef up a pay-per-view. And then there was Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov. Not to say that those guys don't have the merit of deserving the interim title, but obviously Conor McGregor just fought recently, and now there's an interim title play because he's essentially taking a break and doing other things. So it's a very messy situation. What do you think, Damon?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I have so much respect for Anderson Silva. I'm one of those people who do believe he is one of the greatest of all time, and he's put in so much into the sport and given us so much. But this ultimatum, so to speak, is kind of ridiculous in a way. I mean, the guy is 1-4 with 1 no contest in his last 6 fights. He got suspended for a year for steroids. His last win was, I'd say, controversial at best. And when I say controversial, I don't mean to bad things happen. I just mean it was a really close fight. I actually scored it for Derek Brunson. Wasn't a great fight, but I thought Derek Brunson won the fight. And for him to come out and start demanding interim title shots, it just doesn't make any sense. For one, it's not like the title's not being defended. And it's not like it's Michael Bisping's fault the title's not being defended. George St. Pierre requested the fight. The UFC granted him the fight, and the UFC is granting George St. Pierre the time to get ready. So Michael Bisping has been very loud in saying, I wanted to fight in July. He wanted to fight in, he wanted to fight at UFC 213. It's George who didn't want to fight at UFC 213. So that fight's going to get pushed back to, October and November. None of that's on Bisping. I mean, yes, Bisping accepted the fight with George St. Pierre, but guess what? Everybody else in that division would do the exact same thing. Anderson Silva is saying that he was promised, the George St. Pierre fight. If Yoel Romero was offered the George St. Pierre fight, knowing he would get pay-per-view points, there's not a single guy in this division that wouldn't have accepted that fight. So we're not going to begrudge, Michael Bisping for doing the obvious thing and accepting it. So the title's going to be defended. Yes, it's frustrating for Yoel Romero. If anyone has a right to complain here, it's Yoel Romero, not Anderson Silva. And he was going to fight Kelvin Gastelum. That was a good fight. I got it. But like you said, Luke Rockhold was offered the fight with Anderson Silva at UFC 212. He could absolutely still be fighting in his home country right now against Luke Rockhold, which is admittedly a very difficult fight. Luke Rockhold is still one of the best guys in the world, and he turned it down. So this is just one of those bizarre moments where I don't understand his frustration. He was offered a fight against the top 2 contender, former champion. He turned it down. A guy higher ranked than Kelvin Gastelum, a guy with more accomplishments in his career than Kelvin Gastelum. And that's no offense to Kelvin Gastelum. That's just saying what the facts are. Luke Rockhold has done more with his career right now, and he turned that down. And now he's saying, I'm going to get an interim title fight or I'm retiring. What I really hope happens here is I hope the UFC calls his bluff. I really do. I hope they call his bluff and say, okay, if you're going to retire, it's been a great run, Anderson. We'll put you in the Hall of Fame next year, and thanks for everything you've done. And see if he's serious, because I don't know that I believe he's serious. I think he's upset. I think he's angry, and he's lashing out, and I get all of that. But this particular demand is just so bizarre to me, it makes no sense.
Explain this to me, Damon. I mean, you got Vitor Belfort on the card. Were there any discussions whatsoever to possibly make, since it is Vitor's last fight, instead of doing this Nate Marquardt fight, why not put Vitor Belfort up against Anderson Silva?
Well, I know that Vitor and Anderson both had said they didn't want to fight a Brazilian in Brazil again. I think they both, they have a lot of respect for each other, and they didn't want to do that. And I think for Vitor, going out in his retirement fight, I think, as much as Anderson is not the Anderson of old, I don't know that that's still going to be a great stylistic matchup for Vitor after what he's gone through recently, if he wants a, legit chance at winning. But I don't disagree. I think that would have been a perfectly fun fight. I mean, where they're both at in their careers, it kind of makes sense. But it was kind of a bizarre. I mean, like I said, I know Vitor has said numerous times he didn't want to fight Anderson. He especially didn't want to fight a Brazilian in Brazil for his final fight. So as much as we're admonishing Anderson for maybe turning down a fight with Luke Rockhold, a lot of the Vitor thing could have been Vitor saying, I don't want to take that fight against Anderson either. So they may not have even offered it, knowing full well he wasn't going to take it.
I think the other thing is, like, Anderson, I'm not trying to, berate him or make him look bad, but he's obviously sort of playing the victim here. That's the role that he's chosen. He feels like he's been wronged for the UFC, and he feels like he's owed something because he filled in for DC. I will say, though, he was compensated, and I think, even though it didn't look great for him, I don't think it looked that bad for him either. Everybody understood that he was going in on short notice. He could have done anything in that fight. It was like a free pass. He could have had the worst performance of his entire career, and nobody would have said anything because they understood the stipulations. And he was paid handsomely. And I think the other thing about Anderson is sort of, it goes with this whole theme of Luke Rockhold or not wanting to fight certain people. Anderson has had situations in the past where I think a lot of people will say he was a little bit difficult in terms of his opponents. There was him supposedly not wanting to fight Yushin Okami. He spoke about, in his words, what the fuck is going on with Jacare, saying, he should have gotten a title shot. Fair enough, but he also didn't want to fight Jacare either. He didn't want to fight a lot of other Brazilians. So I think in some situations, Anderson was the difficult guy. And also, if you're saying what happened to Jacare and why didn't he get a title shot, I think the thing that makes least sense is for him to go out and all of a sudden get a title shot.
Yeah, and it just goes back to the thing of what's going on in the UFC these days. It's good to get a few options and who you want to fight, and it's nice to look after legends. But when it comes to the point where guys are clearly pretty much picking out who they're going to fight based on matchups, so I don't want to fight this guy because of that. I don't want to fight this guy because I don't know, my chance of winning isn't that good. It starts becoming a bit of a circus, and I feel like it's starting to get to the point now where, the UFC need to tighten up their screws a little bit and be like, look, you are fighting this guy. This is the guy that you are fighting. You have another option. Maybe you can fight this guy. And really sort of tighten up the reins on the fighters. And they're the ones who tell them who they fight. They're the matchmakers. Sometimes you give too much power to the fighters and they'll start obviously picking those smarter fights. And Damon, this brings us to the International Fight Week that's coming up. Last year, Anderson Silva came in. He sort of saved the card by fighting DC. It was a great move for him, by the way, because before that, there was a lot of negative public, I suppose, feelings towards him after everything that's been going on, all the scandals, and that kind of really got him a lot of fans and a lot of people back on his side. So it was a good night for him. But yet again, we've got another International Fight Week. And before anyone even falls off the card, it seems like the card hasn't really even come together. Talk to us a little bit about what you know about this International Fight Week 213 card. And should people bring the expectations down leading into this one? Because at the moment, we've got Cody versus TJ and a potential talk of Amanda Nunes being on the card. Apart from that, we're not really looking at anything too major.
Yeah, nothing really has come together. And I've heard a lot of rumors about what they were trying to do with that card. And I think everyone should kind of temper their expectations at this point, because I know, what the UFC wanted, what Dana White wanted, and what Michael Bisping wanted was the Bisping versus GSP fight to headline that card on International Fight Week with Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw as the co-main event. Now, that's a hell of a good card and guaranteed to sell a lot of pay-per-views. But unfortunately, George St. Pierre is not going to be ready. Now it's looking like, probably October, November for him. He was just on Twitter, kind of teasing perhaps he could fight at Madison Square Garden. I know the UFC wants to go back there before the end of the year. October, November is what I've heard, so it would make a lot of sense. George St. Pierre has a big fan base in New York, so I would look at George St. Pierre and Michael Bisping to headline maybe that Madison Square Garden card later this year. But at UFC 213, there was rumor that Tyron Woodley was going to fight on that card. I heard rumors about him potentially matching up with Nick Diaz. I'm not sure if that's even still on the table. I've heard a lot more rumors that perhaps it's not going to happen. And now, they're talking about pushing Tyron to UFC 214 in Anaheim against the winner of Maya Masvidal, assuming the winner of that fight can come out unscathed and be ready for July 29th. It would obviously give them a lot more time to get ready, because it is basically, 3 weeks after the card on July 8th. And if somebody wins and comes out uninjured on May 13th, it would give them about 2 months to get ready for the fight. Not perfect situation no matter how you cut it, but it's better than having them fight on July 8th and only have about 6 weeks to get ready. So I've heard that as a possibility. You mentioned Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko. I've heard that rumor as well for UFC 213. I mean, that's a great fight, great rematch, and you put that alongside Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw. That's a fun card, but it's not a big card. It's just not. So yeah, it's just as of right now, I wish I could tell you that it's going to be a tremendous, amazing card, but as of right now, I just wouldn't count on it. I mean, I feel like, International Fight Week has become such a big deal with the UFC, and they always try to stack those cards, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. I remember a couple years ago, I think it was UFC 175 was the number, when it was Chris Weidman against Lyoto Machida and Ronda Rousey against Alexis Davis. Now, on paper, you think about that. Ronda Rousey, of course, one of the biggest stars in the sport, but at that time, she wasn't. She wasn't quite the draw at that point that she was towards the end of her career. So her and Alexis Davis didn't really move the needle that much, and neither did Weidman and Machida. And that was kind of a card where it's two title fights, but it just wasn't, those kind of big marquee title fights that you think about now. So that's kind of where we're at. I feel like, if it ends up being Nunes and Shevchenko and Garbrandt and Dillashaw, that's a fun card. Just not a great big card. And also don't forget, on Friday night, we still have the Ultimate Fighter finale, and there's got to be a main event for that card as well. I mean, outside of the finale for the Ultimate Fighter, there's going to be an actual main event. So somebody else has to headline that card as well. So it's a lot up in the air right now, and it's unfortunate because when you really think about it, these cards are coming up quick. People are going to start booking travel. People got to buy tickets. So they better hope they can announce something soon, because we're sitting here literally 2 months away from the card happening.
Well, what's interesting with UFC 200, obviously we know how that kind of fell apart, even in the early goings, even before the John Jones things happened. But, when it was supposed to be Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, there were these press conferences booked, these massive, what was it? I think there was an Unstoppable press conference. There was so many others. They had a new theme and a new color scheme every few months. And you're just not seeing that nowadays, and you're seeing a lot of things being booked really, really last second. I mean, I remember last year when Dennis and myself, we said, yeah, we're going to go to UFC 200, we're going to cover that event. And from a sort of media perspective, like you mentioned, the flights, the accommodation, that shit's really, really expensive. And from a media perspective, we have to really weigh out our options. Do we want to go to these events? I mean, the answer is always yes. We wish we could go to every single event. But to fly from Australia, there, accommodation, flights, travel, all these other expenses, food, everything. I mean, it literally costs thousands and thousands of dollars. And unless you do have like a Conor McGregor or a John Jones or someone massive in the marquee, unfortunately, we have to skip those kind of events. So we've sort of been watching these International Fight Week. The last at least 4 have been massive, and it would have been all, well worth our money. We dodged a massive bullet with UFC 207, something that we wanted to go to, but obviously Ronda Rousey didn't really do any media, and now here we are, a month and a half away, 2 months away, and nothing is really official other than Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw. And I think that we all expected this to happen, after the way the cards were stacked at the end of last year. And obviously Conor McGregor, we knew that he was going to be taking a break, and then the very real possibility of Ronda Rousey retiring. So we knew that, okay, the start is going to be a little bit rough for the UFC, but personally, I didn't expect it to be going all the way until International Fight Week. And I don't think that this year is really going to pick up for the UFC until really much, much later in the year, probably September.
And I think part of it has to do with a lot of the divisions being jacked up at the moment. And I think near the end of the year, we'll have definitive champions. We'll figure out everything that's going on in the middleweight division. Featherweight will be sorted out between Holloway and Aldo. All the stuff will be put together, and we'll be able to see what's going on. But at the moment, everything is just a little bit up in the air. One of the other rumors, Damon, that I want to get your thoughts on is what's happening with Cris Cyborg. I mean, a lot of people thought that maybe she'll be on 214 in Anaheim, possibly against Jermaine Darandami. Now it looks like Jermaine may just vacate a title and never fight again, and that sort of puts her up against Megan Anderson. Can you try to at least attempt to unscramble the situation for us? Do you know anything about this? What's going on?
Well, I know the plan, the hope was to put, Cyborg against Jermaine Durandamy on that card at UFC 214 alongside John Jones and Daniel Cormier. Now, as far as I know, neither one of those fights are done deals right now. I know that there's been rumors about Cormier and Jones going to happen at UFC 214, but even as far as I understand, that's not a 100% done deal, although I would imagine it probably will come together. But yeah, Cyborg against Durandamy was kind of the other marquee fight, and I think because of the attention that Cyborg gets, that would have been a great fight for that card. She's from that area, not too far away from there, living in Orange County, so it would have been a great chance for her to fight and obviously compete for the title. The division was kind of built for her, but from everything I'm hearing, Jermaine is not going to be ready for that card for whatever the case may be. I've heard she's had some personal issues going on, still hasn't gotten cleared with the hand and some other stuff that was happening. So as far as I know, that's not happening now. Anything can change. The UFC could tell her, hey, if you're not fighting, we're stripping you of the title, and we're going to give Cris Cyborg another title fight. I mean, that's a possibility. So maybe that fight comes together because of that. But as of right now, as far as I understand it, Jermaine Durandamy is not fighting on July 29th. As far as Cris Cyborg goes, I think that right now, the division, I really feel like Dana is kind of in that mindset of, what are we going to do with this division? Because the entire thing was predicated on Cyborg, but now Cyborg is going off kind of on her own Iaquinta rant, talking about, how she's got, this much time left on her contract, and if she had been fighting here, and she's posting pictures from Strikeforce hanging out with Scott Coker, it's like, she's trying to taunt the UFC into booking her fight that she wants. And, I think we all have learned through painful experience that doesn't necessarily work when you do that stuff to the UFC. So as of right now, I've heard nothing about Cris Cyborg being rebooked for another fight. I know she talked about fighting Megan Anderson from Invicta, but Megan is not under a UFC contract right now. And unfortunately, there's just no one really on the roster that would make sense for Cyborg to fight that would be a big fight, unless someone from 135 is really willing to step up and fight her. But honestly, there's just nobody available that would be a big enough name that would also be marquee enough to headline an event against the Cris Cyborg. I mean, Misha's gone, Ronda's gone, Holly Holm is just coming off 3 losses in a row, and she's already been booked for a fight with Betch Correia. The options are limited right now, and I think Megan Anderson would probably be the number one option. But then again, if you blow that fight without a title on the line, and let's say Cyborg eventually does fight Jermaine Durandamy and wins, then who do you ever fight at that point? So right now, we're kind of stuck in a lose-lose situation when it comes to Cyborg.
And I think unlike, say, Iaquinta and Anderson Silva, Cyborg is really, she still wants to be part of the UFC. She's just trying to get what she wants. And I think if she does get that title shot, if she does get what she wants, a lot of this is going to be swept under the table. And it's funny, you reminded me of like when it doesn't work in the past, where, obviously you've got Anderson now and Cyborg, and yet it wasn't too long ago that Jose Aldo was adamant that he was going to be retiring, and now look, he's had a fight in the UFC, and he's back to being the featherweight champion. So I think a lot of these things are going to be resolved and or swept under the rug. But you mentioned about how if that fight doesn't come together, what do you really get? And even if it does, let's say Cyborg versus Megan Anderson gets made, the title is on the line. The other thing is what happens with Jones and DC. And again, you mentioned it's not a done deal, but if it is, Dana White's gone on record and he said that Jones and DC won't be headline. He doesn't trust John Jones. But then who headlines? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Tyron Woodley, but let's say best case scenario, Tyron Woodley fights UFC 214, could be against Masvidal, could be against Maia, or maybe even it could be against Nick Diaz. Is that a strong enough main event to overshadow John Jones and DC? Because of course, DC being the champion at the moment, he's relying on those pay-per-view points. If you get a Conor McGregor and he's going to draw pay-per-views, which obviously he's not going to get at 214, he doesn't mind, being in the co-main event. If you get, say, a Cyborg versus Megan Anderson, I don't see that being a main event, and I don't think the DC would allow it. So what do you think happens in that situation? Are you buying it, Damon? If we do get Jones and DC, wherever it is, do you think that it would really be a co-main event?
Well, you also have to wonder where DC's at in all of this. DC has said that he doesn't feel like that fight should be co-main event unless it's to a fight card with Conor McGregor. So that could also be the holdup. I mean, let's go back to the fact that this fight has never been announced and has not been finalized. I know John was just kind of taunting DC a little bit on Twitter about, when somebody asked him about, are you going to sign the contract? And he responded with something like, it's not me who's not signing, or something like that. I have to look at his Twitter and see exactly what he said. But that could be it, because Daniel Cormier has said, I'm not gonna co-main event to anybody but Conor McGregor. Now listen, I understand the point, because the way fights have always gone in the UFC is the heaviest weight class gets the preferential treatment in terms of the main event, co-main event kind of thing. It was only until Conor McGregor came along that we started putting him above everybody else. Now, at this point, we've all kind of gotten over that, and I think even the champions have gotten over that, to understand that the biggest superstar is going to be the person who headlines the card, and that's why Conor has kind of gotten that treatment. And listen, if anyone's getting pay-per-view points on the back end, they're probably not complaining too much that Conor is headlining a card. So, but if DC's saying that, if DC's saying I'm not going to co-main event, that could be the holdup of the Jones fight, because Dana has said, I'm not going to main event John Jones for at least one fight. He needs to earn back our trust. He needs to earn back the fans' trust, and I get it. I understand why he's upset. So I don't necessarily buy that it would be co-main event, but I don't necessarily buy either that it could, put the kibosh on that fight happening right now. It may force John into fighting somebody else, and Daniel Cormier fights against Jimmy Manuwa in the main event, and John Jones fights against somebody else in the co-main event. I mean, that could ultimately be the way this whole thing plays out.
And that's kind of a ridiculous situation that if that does happen, that DC is essentially getting punished when the UFC is trying to punish John Jones. The other flip side to that, and maybe it's minor, maybe it's over-analytical, but do you think in the back of their mind the UFC is thinking, well, you know what? The other upside to having this as a co-main event is what if Daniel Cormier doesn't make weight again? At least that way, if it's a co-main event, we can sweep it under the rug just a little bit easier than if it was the main event. Do you think that's a part of it as well in any way?
I don't think that's part of it, really. I think it all comes down to Dana sticking to his guns about the whole co-main event thing with John Jones. And listen, I understand it. UFC 200 was supposed to be, the kind of the celebration, the big, one of the biggest events of all time. It ended up being, a very big event. Mostly, ended up because of the attraction of people tuning in to watch Brock Lesnar. But, John Jones and Daniel Cormier headlining that card along with Brock Lesnar and along with Miesha Tate and all the other fights they had on there. I mean, listen, we can't sit here and say for certain that it wouldn't have got them an extra couple 100,000 pay-per-view buys, but there's a possibility of that. I mean, the first fight between John and DC was huge. And so when you cost somebody that kind of a fight literally days before it happened, this didn't happen weeks out, this didn't happen a month out, this happened 48 hours before the event. So I understand Dana wanted to stick to his guns and saying that I'm just not going to main event John right now. And this is kind of like him proving a point. And listen, I know Dana, unfortunately, he says a lot of things and goes back on it, a lot. I mean, we ask him something and 3 days later something happens. I mean, it's almost become a meme in MMA where when Dana says something, you kind of expect the opposite to happen. But it seems like, at least on the surface, that he's sticking to his guns when it comes to this particular subject. So that could be it. And I looked up John's Twitter. Somebody asked him if he was going to sign, and John said, am I going to sign? The question is he going to sign? Love how he made it sound like he's backing me into a corner. The fact that he's saying, am I going to sign? I just keep going back to that thought of DC maybe saying, I'm not going to fight this guy in a co-main event. That's not right. And listen, if you're Daniel Cormier and you're not on a Conor McGregor card, and there's not a heavyweight title fight above you, if Stipe is not fighting, or Junior, or whoever's the heavyweight champion at that time, isn't fighting above you, then you really are getting the shaft. You know what I mean? So I understand the upset. If that's what's preventing this fight from becoming official, as petty as it may seem, if I'm Daniel Cormier, I understand his frustration because he's the champion. He's the light heavyweight champion. He should be in the main event.
But if I'm a WME and I'm looking at this huge fight potentially falling apart, and we need this main event. We need this big event. We haven't had one in quite some time. Maybe, in my head, when I'm looking at main event, which is the channel where people order pay-per-views here in Australia, when I think about that and I think about 214, in my head it says John Jones versus Daniel Cormier 2 as the sort of title of that card. Because for all the casual fans, that is the fight that's going to get them to buy that. And I think at the end of the day, maybe the fact that they need a good, strong pay-per-view, maybe that will somehow get Dana to change his mind on it and realize that this is good business and this is what the UFC needs. But if Daniel Cormier does get Jimmy Manuwa, I mean, hey, this is a great thing. We've spoken about this on the program before, but this is a great thing for Daniel Cormier. Here he gets to probably beat Jimmy Manuwa quite easily because, we know the skill sets that both men possess. Of course, Jimmy could, catch him with a strong punch, but predictably, you'd think that, DC would take him down and eventually stop him. So he gets a big payday, and then he gets his John Jones payday and possibly retires after that, depending on how the fight goes. So for DC, possibly this works out, but getting John Jones to take that other fight, and Dana White saying it's John's choice whether he wants a warm-up or the title fight, the whole picture just seems convoluted and crazy. So yeah, man, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it almost feels like 213 is turning into 214. That's gonna be their big card, and still nothing is locked in. But let's change the tune for a second, because in the world of movies, there was a very, very good movie that came out. I don't want to give it away just yet, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 came out in cinemas all around the world, and of course, it's been a while since we've been giving out our Timothy Johnson mustache reviews. Damon, just a quick reminder. At the end of your review, it is policy to give it a rating out of 5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. And to factor in the decimal points, you're able to go 0.5 mustaches. We'll even take 0.3 or 0.2 if you feel really strongly about it. But we're going to kick off this little party with A review from you, Casper. I'm curious to firstly hear what you thought of the movie that we're breaking down this week.
Yeah, so overall I enjoyed it. I think it's like a solid 2-hour movie, which is pretty long, and I was entertained throughout the whole thing. I think the biggest takeaway for me was Drax, which is played by Dave Bautista, or from anyone who's a WWE fan, just Bautista. I think his acting improved significantly. That was probably one of the biggest things that I noticed. In the first one, I know a lot of people like Drax, and I think a lot of his material was well written. He had a lot of good lines. I just don't think that he was very good at delivering them. I think he still seemed kind of nervous and a little bit uncomfortable. And even when he was playing the bad guy in James Bond, I think it was Spectre, he literally had one line in that movie and they dubbed it. When you have one line, one thing to say in a movie and they dub it, it's not a strong sign. And that, not to say that it ruined the first movie, it certainly didn't. I loved the first one, but I don't know, I didn't really buy into Bautista. I thought, well, he looks the part, but he definitely doesn't sound the part. And he was hilarious. Probably my favorite part of this whole movie. He was a lot more comfortable. His comedic timing, his delivery, everything was significantly improved. He laughs a lot in this movie. I felt like it was a genuine laugh. For anyone who watched Bautista in the WWE, they know he's not a great character. They wrote him smartly in the sense that they didn't give him long scripts or long promos, and they didn't give him a lot of time on the mic. And I was blown away. I thought he did a tremendous performance. I think the movie had a lot of really, really fun action sequences. There was some characters that got brought back from the first one, and they sort of expanded on their stories. There was some real tear-jerking moments. I almost teared up at one point, which I think tells you a lot. As far as the main storyline, I mean, I thought it was decent, not necessarily the best. I think the main bad guy in the movie was, I don't know, for me personally, just a tiny bit lacking. It didn't take away from the whole movie itself. I understand the joke, I understand what they were going for, but kind of like in Batman vs Superman, I don't want to compare the two movies in any way, because one was great, one was terrible. But Batman vs Superman, the main bad guy kind of didn't really have any point. There wasn't anything where you look at the grand scheme of what the bad guy's plan was, and you think, alright, I understand it. Kind of like in the last X-Men, not Logan, the one with you know, the last big one. So I think with this one, it's kind of like the bad guy wasn't amazing, but it didn't take away from the story, and there was enough to keep you entertained. In my idea, if I could sort of cross two movies between them, it would be like Star Wars meets Deadpool. So for me, it gets a solid 3.5 Timothy Johnson mustaches.
Ooh, there it is, 3.5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. Damon, we'll save your review to the end, because obviously, Nerdcore Movement, you're the man to ask about this. I'm curious to see what your score is. I'll jump in right now and give my thoughts on the movie. Look, there's a lot of people out there. Obviously, the first one was a great movie, a classic in many people's books. I'm going to go a bit controversial here. For me, this movie, to me, it was actually better than the first one. Now, I know the debate is, in this movie, not that much happens. In the first one, a lot more happens. The storyline sort of takes them across more of the galaxy. There's I suppose you could say, like a better bad guy. There's a few things that happen there. But for this one, had a few overtones that really sort of hit me on a personal level. The father-son overtone, the sister-to-sister overtone, where they were working out the relationships. It was all about family in this one. It was very cleverly put together. The twist at the end with his father was something that I really enjoyed as well. The way they were able to put it all together. A lot of people said that if you take Drax out of this movie, it's not really that funny, but to them I will respond with, I reckon Rocket was really, really good in this movie. I thought Baby Groot, I was thinking, how are you going to get Baby Groot and make him, you know, a big part of this movie compared to Groot in the first one? And they did such a great job. I mean, Baby Groot really steals in a lot of the different scenes, especially the part where he's trying to get Yondu, his little hat thing, back, and he's pulling all these things across. It's just hilarious the way they were able to do it. I'm very, very impressed also at the CGI and the effects in this movie. To me, this was almost like what Star Wars did wrong in a lot of those crappier movies, and that's sort of what I expected. I mean, you saw all these different life forms. It didn't look hokey, and it really kind of worked. And the galaxy and the spaceships, the battle scenes, they all looked really, really good. And Chris Pratt, I mean, in the trailers, I was a little bit afraid because he looked a little bit wooden, a little bit like he was trying to play the character that he played in the first movie, almost like he was patterning after his original work. And in this one, I was actually impressed. He had some depth. He continued on with what he was trying to do. And there were these moments where he had to be a bit more serious, and he was able to pull it off. I really appreciated that. It was a perfect combination of comedy and ups and downs and action and sort of sadness. And when you look at it and you just take a step back from the movie, it's kind of about family, relationships. You can really sort of apply it to your own life, even though we're not intergalactic aliens going from galaxy to galaxy. it sort of goes back to you. You can relate to it. You know, different people have different lives, different upbringings, but you can relate to possibly a relationship with your sister that hasn't gone really well and you just destroy each other. Or you can relate to a tough relationship with a father and not having one. You can relate to family as sort of feeling like you're left out, like Drax did with his family gone. So the only thing I will say is Sylvester Stallone, I don't know about adding him into the movie. I was a little bit like, oh, watch out with the Sylvester Stallone thing. Don't give him too much to do. But they didn't, which I was happy about. But maybe just keep to that. James Gunn did a good job. I mean, the fact that he was able to follow on from a movie that everybody thought was going to be a flop and then expect it to be a superstar performance and was able to do it and sort of differently and not try to do the same thing over and over. I appreciate it. And he signed on to do the third one, even though he spoke about the fact that the pressure was killing him and it was a lot for him. And he didn't want to sign on to do the third one until this came out and sort of just recently agreed to do it. So that's great for the third movie. For this one, though, I give it 4.5 Timothy Johnson mustache. I just really enjoyed it. I don't know, it just really applied to my life, the way I was brought up, the family, the overtones, everything. I watched it twice in the cinemas with different people each time because I like to watch a movie with a person when they're watching it for the first time to see their reactions. I'm really weird like that, and both times it delivered. So I know it's a super high rating. A lot of people are sort of around that 3.5, 4 Timothy Johnson mustaches range, but to me, it really sort of struck a chord. Anyway, Damon Martin, the floor is yours, my friend. Break it down for us and give us your review.
Well, you guys are actually more lucky than most of the people in the States because while I got to see an advanced screening, the movie doesn't actually open until Thursday here in the United States. Wow, yeah, so you guys got lucky. Now I got an advanced screening, so I was lucky enough for review. I was able to screen it, and I'm actually going to go see it again on Thursday night. So that should probably tell you right away what I thought of it. I'm a massive fan of James Gunn, the director and writer behind this. I love his movies. All of his movies have been fantastic, but I love what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy. I've been an avid comic book reader since I was like 8 years old. And even when they talked about doing a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, I literally said to myself, who the hell are they? Like, I just had I've been reading comic books my whole life and I didn't even realize, who that was. So for him to do what he did with the first movie and kind of make these irrelevant characters relevant was amazing. The first movie was a surprise, and I think, much like Doctor Strange, where it's kind of like almost like a B character in a way, where you kind of, you don't necessarily expect much out of it. It ends up being a really fun movie. I think it makes it that much better because you're not going in with expectations. When I go into a Spider-Man movie, I want it to be great because that's one of my favorite comic book characters of all time. And I have a higher bar set for those kind of characters. I didn't have that for Guardians, but then the movie blew me away because not only was it better than what I expected, but it was also just an amazing film all the way around. And I think the sequel does a very, very good job of building on that. And it's not easy to do that because sequels are tough, man, because people expect you to come back and at least match the original, if not outdo it, which is really unrealistic when you think about it. I mean, there's only been a couple of movies in history where the sequels have arguably been better than the original. I would say like Aliens and Alien, but even that is you could argue about that all day, whether Aliens was better than Alien. Some people would say Terminator 2 is better than Terminator, although I'm one of those people who like the original better than the sequel. So it's unrealistic expectations to think a sequel is going to be better than the original. But I think that this sequel is very, very good and very on par with the original. I do agree with the problem with the villain in this movie without giving away any kind of spoilers. The villain is an issue and it kind of takes away a little bit of the film. But here's the problem. Marvel has had issues with villains in almost all of their movies, with the exception of Loki has been a tremendous villain. He did a great job in the original Thor, and obviously a tremendous job in the Avengers movie. But when you look at all of the different Marvel movies, and I'm the biggest Marvel fanboy you'll ever meet when it comes to the movies especially, but none of the villains have really been that great if you think about it. I mean, can you really think of a really great, memorable villain from any of the Marvel movies outside of Loki? Because I can't. Doctor Strange, great movie. The villain wasn't that compelling. Guardians of the Galaxy 1, even then, the villain was pretty solid in the first one, but again, it's not something that I was thinking about afterwards. I was thinking more about the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves and how they came together and all that kind of stuff. So the villain, again, kind of a problem in this movie, but it doesn't take away from it. It's just more of the same with Marvel, where they create their characters and they do such a good job of building their protagonists that they kind of miss out a little bit on the antagonists. And that's a little worrisome as we go into the Avengers Infinity War, because you want Thanos to be the biggest bad of them all. I'm a big Thanos fan, so I hope they really build him up and make him a tremendous big bad. And if I had another argument I would make about this movie, it's just that they still haven't, in my opinion, connected Guardians enough to the other Marvel movies, because we know the Guardians are going to show up in Avengers Infinity War. They're filming that right now. We know the Guardians are in there. It just seems kind of weird that they haven't at least started to kind of make that connection a little bit more, in my opinion. But like I said, it's not a major, it's not a major ordeal. And I love the movie. I thought it was great. I'm going to see it again because it was that good, and I'll definitely be on board to see the third one as well. So I would say 4 strong Timothy Johnson mustaches, but I may even bump up to 4.5 when I see it a second time because I really enjoyed it. The soundtrack was great once again. The acting was great. It was hilarious, which is something you don't always get from a Marvel movie. I mean, they're always kind of funny. They definitely have a lot more levity than, let's say, Batman versus Superman, which was literally one scene away from slitting your wrist at the end of that movie. All the Marvel movies are funnier, but I think Guardians is the most funny. I think it's hilarious. I think it's a great, it's almost like a comedy combined with a great comic book movie. So yeah, I would say 4 strong Timothy Johnson mustaches with the potential of adding a little wax in there and curling that bad boy and making a 4.5.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you bring up a good point. I mean, that's one of the things I was going to mention. I was impressed with Kurt Russell. I was afraid he was going to sort of put in a B-grade performance, but he did a good job. But yeah, I was definitely surprised that they didn't sort of interject the Avengers or any of the other characters into the movie. There were a couple of Earth scenes I thought they could have done it, so that was a little bit disappointing. But just quickly, before we wrap up the show, box office-wise, are you expecting this to go over $1 billion like a lot of the other Marvel movies, or do you think it won't really meet the mark?
I think it'll be pretty big because the first one was a surprise. No one really saw that one coming, and then it kind of ended up being a great big movie and was, just rave reviews all the way around. I think the second one will be even bigger because now people know what to expect. They remember the first one was amazing, and now they're going to be back on board for the second one. So I think it's going to be a much bigger opening and a much bigger movie overall because the first time everyone that went to the first time was either a hardcore Marvel fan that just goes and sees all those movies, or they saw enough of the trailer to think, okay, I'll give this a shot. This time you don't have people saying, I'll give this a shot. There are people going and they're saying, you're coming with me because the first one was amazing. So I think that's where you're going to see even bigger numbers because now there's no question of whether or not this movie can make money. They know it's going to make money. Now it's just a matter of how much money they're going to make.
Yeah, and as long as James Gunn stays as the captain of the ship, I'm sure they'll be hopefully pumping out quality stuff in the future. But with that, guys, it is the end of the program. Make sure to follow Damon Martin at Damon Martin. Check out his awesome work on Fox Sports, and nerdcoremovement.com has you hooked up with all the reviews and all the stuff that's coming out, all the pop culture stuff that you want to hear Damon's thoughts on. And the guy writes some great reviews and does some great coverage, so make sure to check it out. Also, big thanks to Frank Shamrock, Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, and yourselves for tuning in. Next week, we will be back with a UFC 211 preview show. Until then, have a safe week, and thanks for tuning in.